across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome. It is the home of common sense. Thank you to Julia. Back tomorrow, of course, right here on Talk. Loads to get through. As you've been hearing, nearly 1 in 10 universal claimants are foreign nationals. 770,000 people, with millions more receiving other benefits. In 2023, foreign national households got over 7.5 billion in universal credit alone. That's a full third of Rachel Reeves' black hole problem. More on that in just a couple of moments. Also this afternoon, the government's grooming gang inquiry is now in turmoil after its chairman and several victims quit, saying survivors' voices are being ignored and key evidence may be lost. I appreciate to set up an inquiry this big is not the work of a few hours, but how can they get this so horribly wrong at this stage? We'll talk more about that. And talking to the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, she's planning a £2 billion tax raid on lawyers, family doctors and accountants using limited liability partnerships. We'll explain what that is, aiming to close a £30 billion gap in public finances by targeting the wealthy. Where else are you going to go, Rach? More on that story too. Everything you need to know. Obviously, we'll bring you all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. So, it's a straightforward question. What should foreign nationals be entitled to? Today we learned some grim truths, but there are some important nuances here. Let's talk through the headlines and some of the details. You've heard it there now. Nearly 1.9 million foreign citizens claiming UK benefits, and that includes universal credit, housing benefit, child allowance, there's disability issues, pension credits, carers allowance. I mean, the list goes on. In July, the Department for Work and Pensions published data showing that 1.26 million foreign nationals were claiming universal credit after an increase of more than a third since 2022. This is the kind of figure, when I first read that story, despite doing this day in, day out and being surprised by almost nothing these days, particularly when it comes to financial woefulness on behalf of politicians. When I read the headline that 1.26 million foreign citizens were claiming universal credit after an increase of more than a third since, I thought the figure was going to be 1990 or something like that, maybe possibly 2000. Not 2.5 years ago. Seriously? Data from the Labour Force survey conducted between April and June this year showed an extra 623,377 foreign citizens were claiming other types of benefits or a combination of benefits, not including the aforementioned universal credit. So the 1.88 million combined figure, which includes all the benefits I just mentioned, the cost of universal credit payments sent to foreign citizens was 10 billion quid last year. So firstly, you have to define what they mean by a foreign citizen. Now, I know quite a lot of people who came here from France and Poland and Spain who've been here for decades. I mean, this is literally where they live. They've lived here longer than they lived in their country of origin. It's where they've set up home. It's where they've set up a business. They've got kids. Their kids are now adults. They pay their taxes like anybody else. That person would be described as a foreign citizen. Still, if they are retain their passport, they would still have that status. At least I'm willing to be told differently. Perhaps you are in that cohort that I just mentioned, that you've been here forever, you come originally from another country, but your entitlement, I think everybody could look at that and go, well, that's kind of fair, isn't it? That if you are living here, you're resident here, you're paying in here, and you have done for 3 or 4 decades, and then you retire, it's probably here where you're going to get your pension. It's probably here where you raised your kids and got child allowance. It's probably here where you might get a carer's allowance if you're looking after a relative. That bit kind of makes sense to me. You know, nobody ever suggested that only one nation should live in only one country. If we went to other countries in similar circumstances, we would also be entitled to X, Y, and Z. Maybe not everything, but of course that isn't what we're talking about here, because these figures have shown an increase of a third since 2020. A third. since 2022. You've got 1.26 million foreign citizens claiming universal credit in that time. What happened in this country then we required that amount of people to come to this country? And if we required them to come here because there was a huge shortage in some particular job area, then why would we be paying universal credit? So clearly at least a third of that number, probably 2/3 of that number, should have no entitlement to that benefit whatsoever. That's not controversial or weird or right-wing or anything like that. It's bloody economics, mate. It's as simple as that. There's no grey areas on this one. In the last 2.5 years, people who came to this country claiming universal credit, in which case you should not really be in this country. Fair play for you for giving it a go, but you really shouldn't be here. To answer that question, what should foreign nationals be entitled to? How would you break that down? What does that look like to you? And if you are of foreign extraction, if you come from elsewhere but made a life here, just explain what your situation is, and did you have to jump through hoops? I mean, if you are resident and you are here on a full-time basis, you're paying into the system. So if you come here from Australia, our last producer on this show, Adam, was here for, I think, 7 or 8 years, 6, 7, 8 years. He was here on a working visa. He paid his taxes. He's paid his national insurance. He would be entitled to use the NHS because he's literally paying for it and paying for the visa as well. So we get all of that. But notwithstanding those kind of realities, which we all understand, we clearly have a massive chunk of people that are entitled to all of that, having been here for a couple of years. 0344 499 1000. What should foreign nationals be entitled to? Our lines are open on that. Let's get a word with Chloe Dobbs, political commentator with us. Chloe, good afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Ian.
Well, let's start with this very point. As I said at the beginning, it's an incredible headline that 1.9 million foreign citizens are now claiming benefits in this country. Cost of universal credit payments alone reaching 10 billion last year. I mean, these are jaw-dropping, eye-watering numbers. The figures include a wide range of benefits as Labour unveils a good citizen test for migrants seeking settlement. Labour still doesn't seem to have an answer, but Reform UK are pretty clear on this. Have a listen to their leader, Nigel Farage, and what he had to say.
We've given you full details. None of the 800,000 plus that came here under the Boris wave that will be available to apply for indefinite leave to remain over the course of the next 3 to 4 years, none of them will be given indefinite leave to remain. None of them will be given access to the UK's benefit system, and none of them will be able to bring dependents. That, I think, is quite a lot of very exact policy detail.
That's what Mr Farage said. The Conservatives are sort of echoing a little bit of that these days, Chloe, and I'm not sure to what extent or whether their heart's truly in it, but these numbers are horrific.
Yes, and just going back to the question you were asking at the beginning, Ian, as to whether these people claiming benefits are people who have been here for decades and decades, just when you look through these figures in the Times article on this, although they don't clearly define a foreign citizen, they go on to say that on top of this 1.9 million, there are an additional 1.5 million foreign citizens who have been here long enough to also get British citizenship who are claiming benefits. So overall, if you include foreign citizens with and without British passports, it's 3.4 million in total. So it sounds like that 1.9 million are people who have not been here long enough to get a British passport, presumably because you have to have indefinite leave to remain first to qualify for universal credit and whatnot. Those are people who have been here for the 5 years they need to be to get indefinite leave to remain, but not long enough to get a British passport. And I think Nigel Farage's policy is correct. I think that they are right, unlike Keir Starmer, who thinks it's racist, to go back to the people who have been given indefinite leave to remain and say, no, we're scrapping that and we're going to have to do a review every few years to just check that you speak English and you earn money and you pay your way rather than living off the state. I think that that's fair.
I don't think anybody could say it isn't fair. And when I look at those numbers, as I mentioned in that intro, Chloe, that we have this whacking great big increase of more than a third since 2022 of foreign citizens claiming universal credit. So this is in the last 2.5, 3 years. So who are those people? How did they arrive here? On what criteria did they arrive here? And how on earth, if they arrived here as a skilled worker, then what's going on if we need to top up their wage with universal credit?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, the size of the welfare state is ballooning for both British citizens and foreign citizens, and it is just completely unsustainable, as well as completely unfair. And there have been some interesting graphics being put out by, I think it's Migration Watch is the organisation, where they've identified certain boroughs, and for example, Birmingham and London, where the majority of people in those boroughs who are in social housing, i.e. being funded by the state, are foreign born, and people are thinking this isn't fair, especially given the huge wait for social housing. And then they've also put up the percentages in those boroughs of the people who are foreign born who are actually in employment, and it is just absolutely shocking. And it really does feel like we're some sort of charity for the rest of the world. And of course it's nice to be charitable, but not when you are broke and your own citizens can't get social housing, can't get an NHS appointment, can't put food on the table, can't pay their rent.
And I mean, that list is extensive. As you just said, we've got huge issues with the cost of living crisis, people trying to make ends meet, and not just talking about people who are economically at the lowest point of the ladder, people who are, you know, the just about managing group who work and they've got jobs and they were seen as reasonable jobs, but just not covering things, struggling like mad. And Rachel Reeves telling us, oh, we've got to find money from somewhere. We've got to do all we can and pull together and, do the right thing. And you read statistics like this.
Yeah, and we're also hearing that inflation is not coming down. So that is a big problem. Food inflation, I think, is really starting to pinch. That's the thing that I personally in my day-to-day life notice the most. I feel like I pop into Tesco, I buy a few snacks and it's 30 quid. And I think, how on earth has that happened? Yeah. So that is really hurting households, especially the poorest households that spend a huge proportion of their money on food inflation. And then when they see, for example, migrants in hotels that just came across here illegally being given a lovely buffet 3 times a day, it does start to make people feel some level of resentment and frustration. And I think quite rightly, and people are really fed up of living in what they call two-tier Britain, where if you come here from another country, whether that's legally or illegally, you seem to be treated far better than British citizens, and that is deeply wrong. And it's not racist, as Keir Starmer might think, to say that if you come here from another country, you need to pay your way and you need to contribute.
Yeah, I don't know what. I can't think of anywhere I would go in the world where I would expect somebody else to pay for me to be there. I mean, it's just beyond belief I would ever consider that to be the case. Let's move to this story. Another disturbing story of our times. Labour's grooming gang inquiry is in absolute chaos at the moment, with the shortlisted chair, 3 abuse victims stepping down. People are now calling it a cover-up, condemning the inquiry's toxic atmosphere. Worth having a listen to somebody who's very well connected to all of this. This is the Parliamentary Secretary of State for Safeguarding and Violence Against Women and Girls, Jess Phillips. Here's what she said, her statement on the inquiry.
The government remains resolute in delivering Baroness Casey's recommendations following her national audit into group-based child sexual exploitation and abuse. These crimes committed by grooming gangs are among the most horrific imaginable, and her report exposed over a decade of institutional inaction, and we are determined to ensure such failures are never repeated.
Well, we will see on that last point. I've never really felt... I used to know Jess Phillips a little bit because she did a lot of stuff on our panels about a year ago, and then she sort of got into government. And I've never really felt that... I don't know why, because ordinarily, if you're a lefty, and she is a true, and she would say proud lefty, these are the kind of causes you would imagine that you... And you're also in charge of safeguarding violence against women and girls, you would imagine that this would be right at the heart of everything you stand for. But I sense gritted teeth on this one every time she speaks.
Yes, I think Jess Phillips has really fallen from grace, to be honest, because she used to be highly respected on both sides of the House for her work with women and girls. who have been sexually assaulted, raped, etc. But it seems like on this issue that she hasn't said the right things ever since there have been calls since around January time for a national inquiry. It was around Christmas time that we had it revealed that she had rejected Oldham's requests, and that all blew up and looked really, really bad for her. And then when she has continued to face questions on the progress of a national inquiry, it's been really embarrassing. And that's really, with all of these victims now resigning from the panel and Jess Phillips essentially calling them liars in the Houses of Parliament, she is starting to look really unprofessional. And I mean, the clip you showed of her there, she seemed to have it together a little bit, but there's the other clip of her talking about Oldham, saying I won't be told what to do by councils, where she looks really out of control and really desperate and not a professional politician at all. And again, I think quite disrespectful to Oldham Council, saying they won't tell me what to do, when Oldham Council have been absolutely begging her for guidance as to when they can start their inquiry, how exactly they are supposed to go about it. Everything's been very quiet about this inquiry since it was finally announced after a lot of pressure. Labour, of course, insisting for months and months on end, we don't need this inquiry, the ICSA report is good enough. It wasn't until they were essentially forced by Louise Casey's report to announce this national inquiry. Now we've got it. It feels like they don't really want to do the right thing and properly explore the kind of grooming that is such a big concern, because one of the reasons why these victims are resigning from the panel is because they are concerned that they are trying to water down the inquiry, to broaden the scope of it, to make it essentially another ICSA inquiry that doesn't address the issue of grooming gangs being covered up because people are scared of being called racist.
Indeed.
And you've had victims who have resigned said that already in their engagement in this process, submitting questions, etc. They felt as though they're not really allowed to mention the fact that it is Asian men predominantly who abuse them. And so it just feels like we're getting nowhere with this. And what's the point in having a big, long, expensive inquiry if we're not going to learn anything new from it?
I mean, it's, for those that are sensitive to, diversity issues, then it is worth pointing out that nobody had any truck with saying that it was Catholic priests that were at the centre of a religious child abuse inquiry, and that was relevant if you were Columbo working out all the salient factors and didn't mention any correlating and collective areas where there is a clear chain of events that link perpetrators together, then you'd lose your job as a detective, frankly. I mean, it's just pointing out the obvious and should not be refuted as racism or unnecessary when it's said. But that's where I see Jess Phillips squirm on this kind of stuff. She just can't hear those words mentioned without thinking there's some other agenda at play here. There's only one agenda, and that's that thousands of young girls were abused on an industrial scale by men predominantly in this respect, because I appreciate, people will look at child abuse and say, well, there's, all sorts of areas where domestic child abuse is not that particular group. Fine, that's fine. But in this particular case, we're talking about grooming gangs. These men are invariably Muslim, Pakistani origin, and that is a correlating factor in this story. That's it, end of. You don't need to be a lawyer to point that out. And now we've got some of these victims telling Jess Phillips she should stand down. So this is how bad it's got. We're going to be back as well, Chloe. Stay with us with more from Chloe Dobbs in a couple of moments' time. 1:20. This is Talk.
It's always emotion for her, isn't it? And
it is.
And there's a certain arrogance there. There's a certain, how dare you question me? I've campaigned on this issue for many years. Who do you think you are attitude?
I wouldn't be surprised if many of her colleagues actually do begin to think that, you know, I'm not saying she shouldn't go into another job or something, but certainly I think she's been in that now and has obviously lost all respect of those victims who are most important in this.
At the end of the day, they are the only people who matter.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And some breaking news as well in the last few moments. A judge has lifted reporting restrictions, which means we can name the boy who killed Harvey Wilgoose. You may remember the story of Harvey, who was stabbed to death at his school, All Saints Catholic High School in Sheffield, during a lunch break. This goes back to February the 3rd this year, and naturally because of ages they didn't name the defendant. We now know, and the judge, Mrs Justice Ellen Bogan, has named the defendant, also 15, as Mohammed Umar Khan. And that news has just been released. Chloe Dobbs is with us, looking at the big stories of the day. Let's talk Rachel Reeves, Chloe, because that's always a really nice thing to do on a Wednesday afternoon. She's going to launch a £2 billion tax raid on the wealthy Brits, because that's the only place she can get it from. But with thousands of millionaires reportedly leaving the UK, is a wealth tax the right move? It's worth reminding ourselves of what Big Rach said, promising there won't be another budget like last year's. Here she is in action.
This is a once-in-a-parliament budget. I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes. We don't need to come back for more. We're not going to have to come back and ever do a budget like this again. So never again will I have to do a budget like I did in October. There is no need to come back with another budget like this. We never need to do that again.
5 minutes later. There are tax rises coming down the track.
Yeah, but
That is absolutely brilliant, that compilation.
It's beautiful. Boomerang Rach is back, and this time it's personal. Well, it's personal if you're worth a few quid by all accounts, Chloe.
Yeah, I mean, with all of the things that Labour announces, there are tweets and there are videos that we can dig out, and it just makes them look absolutely, makes them look like fools. And Rachel Reeves is clearly a completely incompetent chancellor that's got us stuck in this horrible fiscal doom loop where we borrow more money, and then we realise, oh, we need to put up taxes to pay for all of that borrowing, and then consequently the growth forecasts get downgraded, and we realise, oh, wait, we're not going to have as much money coming in as we thought, so we're going to have to put up the taxes even further, and it just goes on and on and on. And then when you take into account the fact that inflation is not going down, inflation is well above the Bank of England's target, that is a huge problem for the UK, where we have one of the highest proportions in the world of our debt linked to inflation. So when inflation goes up, we need to spend even more money on our debt servicing costs, which means that Rachel Reeves now has even more money to find, and she's had this investment summit yesterday to try to signal to the OBR that maybe things are looking up, and because they've downgraded the productivity forecast, and that's one of the reasons why Rachel Reeves desperately needs more money. I'm not sure how much of a success that was. We haven't really heard much about it in the news, to be honest. I'm not sure the OBR are too impressed. So it's just this horrible fiscal doom loop, and I really don't see an end to it. And as you say, she's going to try and stick to her manifesto pledges, perhaps by going after the wealthy. But this is just socialist, ideological rather than practical policy. Yes, maybe it seems fair in principle that wealthier people need to pay their bit of national insurance.
Well, that might be true, but what does she do?
Pay a fairer share.
But what does she do on the next budget, Chloe? What does she do on the next budget? I mean, that's the question.
Well, exactly, and I think even if she this time doesn't raise income tax and VAT, probably next year it will be the same story. And also we will have, if she decides to put up taxes on the wealthy, sure enough, more and more of them will leave the country. Now, the top 1% of earners in this country pay a third of the tax. if that 1% all leave and go to Dubai, say goodbye to a third of the tax revenue. The top 10% pay over 60% of the taxes, right? So first of all, these people are paying way more than your typical person has ever paid in tax. So the idea that these are all evil millionaires that don't pay anything is for the birds. But also, you've just got to be practical about it and realise they are all going to leave. We need to actually, in order to pay for things like the NHS, like net zero, if that's what you really want to go about, you need to get the economy growing first in order to get tax receipts up. But they're not doing anything to grow the economy. They're shutting down the economy, essentially.
Yes, and yes, because that's exactly where we're going. And there is no, at the moment, if you could kind of, I don't know, if you could show your workings out, as they say, and go, OK, well, she's got to do this to get to this. But don't worry, kids, because if you look at that, look what she's doing here. She's taking us down this, and then she's going, and there is none of that. There's no, like, kind of magic. You're not looking at a fiscal genius here going, boy, she's good. She really knows what she's doing with an abacus, that one. I don't think there's any sense of that. But we will wait. I can't wait for the budget in many respects, just to kind of further expose the ineptitude of what we sort of already know. It's almost confirmation time for many of us. And let's move to this story. We did touch on this yesterday. Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick speaking on The Breakfast Show yesterday about his views regarding the burqa. This story is now, as they say, gone a bit viral. Lots of people talking about it. But this is what he said when he was asked this question by a caller.
Just a thought. Instead of banning Maccabee, how about banning the burqa and halal meat?
Right. Well, I probably would ban the burqa. But then you've also seen Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister, say in the last week that this is something that she's going to pursue. So I think there's definitely a strong argument for it. Look, there are basic values in this country, and we should stand up and defend them. And where you're seeing them fraying at the edges or frankly being completely destroyed, whether it's Sharia courts or wearing of the burqa, these are issues we're going to have to confront if we want to build the kind of society that we want to hand on to our kids and grandkids.
Two distinct ways, of course, of looking at this, Chloe. You can see the persuasive arguments about banning a burqa. Looks a bit odd in contemporary Western settings to many people. But, of course, there's another overarching argument, the sort of Boris Johnson argument, is that, do governments really get involved in what people can wear?
Yeah, it is a difficult one because on the one hand, if you're a libertarian and you want people to have the freedom to do, say, and wear what they want, you'd think initially, perhaps we should allow people to wear the burqa. But then when you realise that you've kind of got conflicting freedoms because you've got so many women who are having their freedoms taken away from them, and it's very difficult for us to integrate and have conversations and debates with each other in society if you simply can't see each other, I think that's quite problematic. So you'll have some women say, oh, I wear the burqa because it's my choice. But then if you say to them, oh, what would happen if you didn't wear that burqa? And then they admit, oh, yes, my husband would beat me and my family would completely ostracize me, you realize maybe that's not really freedom. So it's a bit of an issue, and I think banning it in public at least possibly is the right thing, but whether that is something that political parties should be focusing on as their top priority when it could be very controversial, from a political expediency perspective, I'm not sure.
Chloe, always a pleasure. Great to see you again. We will speak soon. She is Chloe Dobbs, political commentator. Over to you on any of that, particularly that issue of the burqa as well. It's always rather interesting to know whether you kind of side with the sort of libertarian, of all the things we've got to sort out in government, are we going to ban a piece of clothing that some people don't like? There's quite a lot of clothing, you could argue, that looks a bit iffy from time to time. But is that where you want our emphasis to be? On the other hand, you could argue actually it's a fairly symbolic thing, but would you have to stop at just the burqa? Would you go to other areas of religious symbolism too? 0344 499 1000. And the big question we asked at the beginning, what should foreign nationals be entitled to when it comes to welfare in this country? Our lines are open. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk, 0344 499 1000. By the way, we're just getting some news as well, under the banner, firmly under the banner of you really couldn't make this up. And I really promise you, I'm not making this up. But, you know, we've got this brilliant one-in, one-out scheme, which isn't quite working out in the way. I think 40-odd people have been sent back to France, and at the same time, I can't remember how many thousands it is that have come in during that time. Anyway, one of the men sent back to France under the one-in, one-out scheme has just returned to the UK on a small boat. This is a Guardian report of all places. The man who wants to claim asylum in the UK and has spoken to the Guardian since coming back is being held in a UK immigration detention centre and claims to be a victim of modern slavery at the hands of smugglers in northern France. This is a flipping chancer, if ever there was one. This is what's wrong with it. He's come back in. Where do you get the money to come back in, aside from anything else? Let's continue in the vein that we've been discussing here, and that is almost 1.9 million foreign citizens are now claiming benefits in Britain, with the cost of universal credit payments alone reaching 10 billion. Wow. The figures include a wide range of allowances as Labour unveils a good citizen test for migrants seeking settlement. I mean, some of the stats that I brought you at the beginning of this are just unfathomable and disturbing, particularly when you consider that foreign nationals claiming universal credit has increased by a third in the last 2.5 years. Let's speak with Frank Haviland, editor of The New Conservative. Frank, good afternoon to you. Nice to have you with us. I mean, we knew we were in deeply troubling territory on this one already, but these figures are jaw-dropping.
They're insane. And as you mentioned, the guy, I think it's 42. We sent 42 back to France, Ian, apart from, I don't know, about 5,000 or 6,000 that have come in the meantime. So that's down to 41. And you ask, where did he get the money? Well, he probably got it from the UK taxpayer, yes, who's very, very generous. Yeah. These figures are insane. I mean, it's no surprise people want to come to Britain. I think we should reduce those numbers, really.
I mean, it's interesting. I understand if somebody has lived here for 4 decades, longer than they ever lived in their country of origin, whether it's Poland or Spain, France, those kind of examples, and this is where they've raised their family, their kids are now adults, everybody pays tax, everyone's got a job. Of course you're entitled to an allowance like anybody else. You're probably resident in this country, but we're not really talking about those people, are we? We're talking about somebody in the last 2.5 years that arrived in this country presumably under some kind of visa arrangement of some sort, and yet that visa arrangement, or the need and necessity for them to be here, Frank, can't have been that great because we're topping up their wages with universal credit.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, Britain basically just needs to get a sensible immigration policy that almost any other country in the world would have. And I have first-hand experience of this. I actually moved out to South Korea nearly 15 years ago. And the immigration policy this side is extremely tough. So first of all, you have to have a job. You have to have a valid visa, which will be anything from 6 months to a year. You have to pay your own health insurance, which is 50% you, 50% your employer. Yeah. You have to have a health check with 0 major problems. Any drugs, any kind of problems that you've got, you won't be accepted. Any kind of criminal record, you won't be coming over. I.e., the immigration policy works that what we're trying to do is prioritise Korean citizens because we're in Korea. But if you take that in the reverse, if and when I want to return, I have 2 daughters who are British citizens. I'm actually divorced or divorcing at the moment, but if I'm ever insane enough to get married again and I want to bring a spouse over, I'll need to pay be about $5,000 for the visa. Yep. She'll need to be earning. It was about 29,000. I think it's gone up to nearly 35,000. Quite a hefty whack. All sorts of other additional costs. Yep. She would need to speak very good English.
On that point, Frank, great to have you on. Thank you for your time. Frank Haviland is the editor of The New Conservative. Let's look at the economics of all of this. Joe Mitchell is Professor of Economics at the University of West England. Joe, good afternoon to you. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to get you back on a better line, Joe, because we're struggling to hear you at this end. But we shall address this forthwith. This from Brad, who says, the question really ought to be, how can anyone justify spending such a huge sum on foreign nationals? Absolutely ridiculous, says Brad in Cambridge. Andy in Southampton. Ian, how about foreign citizens should be entitled to exactly the same as we would be if we were going to their country and have to satisfy the same criteria to stay here as we would if we wanted to stay there? You'd think so. I mean, there's obvious arrangements. If you take a job somewhere, then I'm sure, if I went to take a job in Spain tomorrow or Bulgaria, there's probably forms I've got to fill out. There might be a payment required so I can access the healthcare in that country. I mean, there's reciprocal arrangements and stuff like that. We all get that. That's not hard to understand that bit, but we're not ultimately talking about that. Why have we got a third of foreign nationals who've arrived here since 2022 on universal credit? And we're just talking about, that's just one benefit of all the others that are in this eye-watering set of statistics. I mean, it beggars belief. And then we have governments pulling their hair out, going, well, we don't know how to solve this. We think we're going to... I know what we'll do. We'll keep it going. We'll just tax the rich people. They can flip and pay for it. Unbelievable. Billy is on the west coast of Denmark. Billy, good afternoon to you.
How's it going, Ian?
Very good, thanks. Yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
Give them not a brown penny. Make sure they've got to be self-sufficient before they land for minimum 2 years. And after that, it's minimum for a certain period of time. If you still don't have a job, bye now. Well, the only thing we'll give you is a plane ticket for you and your family back to your country of origin. Because all they're doing is taking the money, living on peanuts, and then sending it back to their own country and taking our money out of their country.
I don't think anybody could say that's unfair, would they? I mean, you're in Denmark at the moment. Do you live in Denmark, Billy?
No, I live in Scotland, but I work here for 3 weeks at a time. I pay Danish tax. If I want to go to a doctor or a dentist or anything over here, I have to pay.
Yeah.
But I pay Danish tax, which is 48%.
Wow. So you have to pay that as well?
Yes.
And you don't? Do you get anything for paying Danish tax?
Nada. None.
So you're not entitled to anything, even though you have to give nearly half of your money to the Danish government?
Exactly.
Wow. Yeah, that is a system. I know that there are various comparisons often made with Scandinavian countries, and maybe that's the reason why people look on them as favourably and why they've got a few quid more than we might have. Billy, great call. Thank you very much indeed for that. This one's from Alan on the Isle of Wight. It says, how do these foreign nationals get these benefits? I've paid into the system for 40 years and have a watch and wait status, liver cirrhosis and blood cancer that creates massive bouts of fatigue. Other the lowest level PIP. Other than that, I get nothing. I was made redundant 18 months ago, and once the ESA ran out, I was told that that's it. My wife's on a modest $23,000 per year, earns too much for universal credit. I'm now selling personal stuff on eBay to make ends meet. Wow. We have Joe Mitchell back with us. We lost contact for a second there, Joe, Professor of Economics at the University of West England. Nice to have you back with us.
Good afternoon, yes.
I often wonder with, I wouldn't want to work in the Treasury. I'd imagine it's an absolute flipping minefield because you're not just dealing with the numbers, you're dealing with the politics that go with the numbers as well. So, somebody comes up with a great solution and says, look, this is how we do it. And then another person says, it might sound good, but you can't do that because we're the Labour Party or we're the Conservative Party and we promised this. So you've got it's just a sort of perpetual juggling thing that is going on, which, is not always helpful. But I do sense sometimes, Joe, that governments go for the path of least resistance. Would that be fair when it comes to how they distribute money?
On this particular issue, it's a long-standing fact, really, that people who live and work in this country, pay tax in this country, are also entitled to pay benefits in this country. And so I'm not sure that there's a particular political angle to it in the way you suggest. It's just a function of how the system works, that if you're here and part of the system, then you're entitled to...
I kind of get that, and I was talking about people who've been here 30, 40 years, you know, they've lived here longer than they've lived in their country of origin, their kids were raised here, etc. You know, I understand that you're a resident, essentially. You have residency and you're allowed to stay here. I guess it becomes certainly worth raising the question that if you've come here in the last couple of years, presumably on some kind of visa arrangement, and yet you're claiming universal credit, then there is clearly a big question mark over that. You're obviously legally entitled to it, otherwise you wouldn't be able to claim it. So nobody's disputing that bit. But it would seem that somewhere in the workings out, someone's got something horribly wrong if you have to import people to work and yet simultaneously pay them from the welfare system to be here.
Yes, but the numbers we're talking about that have been reported in the Telegraph and the Times today are not distinguishing. They're talking about all people who are here.
Indeed, and I did make that point at the beginning.
Yeah, including people like my wife, for example, who's Irish, has been here 25 years, working the whole time. We're part of that statistic because we have claimed child benefit during that time. Because
Although
we have...
is the Irish... I mean, Ireland and the UK have a very specific arrangement in that respect, don't they? Because you could go and work in Ireland and get the same thing.
Indeed, but she's not a British national, not a British citizen, and so that's the category.
So she would come under that category, and which is in that category. Yeah, which is specifically, Joe, why I mentioned at the start. You know, people, huge amounts of people who've been here forever, and it's their life, and you know, blah blah. However, if you've got people, and that stat about universal credit has gone up by a third of foreign nationals in the last 2.5 years, then I appreciate this is largely maybe a political question rather than an economic one, but nonetheless, it's a bit eye-watering to think, what sort of system are we running when the Treasury are telling us we're out of cash, let's go and get some money off the rich, while simultaneously importing labour into this country, which we are having to also pay for. That seems like an economic disaster.
I think you're right that we're seeing several things that are not working, and I think the benefit system is not working in many ways. Part of what this reflects is the fact that a large number of people on universal credit are working. So benefit claimants in this country, regardless of their origin or their nationality, are often working because the wages they're paid are not high enough to maintain a decent standard of living. People working in care, for example, people working in the National Health Service, nurses are unable to make ends meet. So in a way, you could think about this as like a tax break. I mean, the difference between a benefit and a tax is zero, really. Paying someone a benefit is the same as giving them a tax cut. So we have a system which effectively gives tax breaks to those on low incomes, particularly those in essential jobs like care and the health service. And indeed, many of those people have come from overseas and play a crucial role in keeping our country afloat. I mean, I would hate to see what would happen to our old people, our young people who are in care, the National Health Service, if we didn't have people coming here to work in those services, because for whatever reason we don't currently have available staff.
And that's been the case forever. You know, I don't think any of us can remember a time when you walked into an NHS hospital and you didn't meet people who were from another country who were there to make you better. You know, we've seen that forever. I just wonder whether we need to recalibrate what the welfare state is capable of. If you look, you know, back in the 1940s when this was first suggested, you know, all sorts of people thought the world had gone barking mad at this welfare system, none more so than the British Medical Association, as you may well be aware, Joe, who thought it was an outrageous idea that you were going to socialise medicine in this way. What would their members do? They'd be exploited, etc. Nonetheless, we are where we're at. I don't think anybody envisaged in 1948 that 2025 would look quite like this.
There was a very good bit of analysis by Chris Giles, one of the senior writers at the Financial Times just this week, explaining that this sort of hysteria we're seeing at the moment about welfare spending being out of control is really based on nothing. The percentage of GDP is about 11%. It's broadly stable. It's projected to be below where it was in 2010 in David Cameron's time. There's an expansion of spending on pensioners because the population is aging. And again, people coming here, younger people coming here to work, actually mitigate that problem. They pay in broadly more tax than they take out, and therefore they contribute to keeping older people afloat. So the idea that our benefit system is somehow out of control or unsustainable is just not supported by the figures.
But why does every politician say otherwise? I mean, you know, even the Labour Party themselves have been arguing forever. The Conservatives are now having the same argument, but on the other side of the House. Reform, of course, are emphatically making this point. I'm pretty sure if you've got a Green Party member on the right day, they tell you quietly that we need to do something about the welfare budget.
It's interesting that Labour has chosen to effectively echo what the Conservatives and Reform have said on this, because, as I say, that the statistics don't support it, and you might expect the Labour Party to therefore mount some opposition to these claims. But also, while we're on a related topic, the current plans to revoke indefinite leave to remain that are coming out of Reform, but have also been now adopted by the Conservative Party, are completely mad. The economic damage that would be done, as well as the social damage to families and communities, is impossible to imagine. If this country really did revoke the rights of huge numbers of people who have been here, as you say, settled, part of families, long-run members of our society and economy, and tore up that decades-old contract, we would become a pariah state. We would become the place that nobody wants anything to do with, and then you really
But
would
isn't there a happy medium there? I mean, as you rightly say, around about 11% of GDP, that's fairly consistent, and I understand that, but if you look at it in the other way, that's still £315 billion or thereabouts on any financial year. There's nothing wrong, surely, Joe, once in a while, saying, well, let's take a look at the numbers again. Can we afford a system that functions like this? We just took a call from a guy in Denmark who said he pays 48% of his wages in tax, but he's a British citizen. He gets nothing back for that. If he wants to go to the doctors, he has to pay. If he wants treatment, he has to pay. Do we need to be just a bit more savvy when it comes to how we dish out the cash in this respect?
I don't think so. I think there's an awful lot to say in favour of relatively universal, relatively conditionality-free systems that are free at the point of use. The National Health Service has been a huge success over its lifetime. There are pressures now because, as I say, we have an ageing population. We have the effects of austerity for the last 15 years. That's given us weak growth, weak wage growth, low productivity. We've got the effect of the pandemic, which we were badly unprepared for as a result of austerity. And we're dealing with all those problems. But I don't think that government spending is out of control. There's no real evidence to suggest that. Taxes will need to rise in the budget, and they are going to rise in the budget, but things are fairly stable.
All right, Joe, it's a very optimistic note. We don't hear that very often. Thank you. Nice to have you with us as well. Joe Mitchell, Professor of Economics, University of West Midlands. A lot of you screaming at your radios and TVs going, what's he talking about? You want to respond to that? Lines are open, 0344 499 1000.
Well,
Blood was boiling just watching Boris Johnson defending himself. Oh, rub my hair. Oh, I didn't want to do anything, but I had to. We didn't know then what we know now.
I just find the whole scenario quite ridiculous now. Just to say, up till March this year, estimates £130 million the inquiry cost, and my current estimate is about £1 million a week. How come these people in power could use modellers to see the future, but they can't use common sense to see the obvious? And the obvious is they went too far.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This one on the burqa, by the way. Ron in Devon says, I'm in favour of banning the burqa, but how will it work? If the legislation is generally banning face coverings, then I will not be able to wear my balaclava in the winter. Or will the legislation have to be aimed at specific groups? Who wears a balaclava these days, just out of interest? Finn, do you go balaclava bound? No, it makes sense. I'd forgotten about balaclavas because I'm not 8. But I think Ron has got a really good point. Bring back the bally. That's what I say. The campaign starts here. Michael in Birmingham, never knowingly seen in a balaclava. Michael, good afternoon to you.
Well, I don't know, Ian, I'm a bit of a modern-day roadman. You know, those little scooter guys, they wear ballys. Bally kids, they call them in Liverpool, don't they?
Do they really? I didn't know that. I thought I'd just coined the phrase myself. There we go. Now we know. The bally kids, yeah.
You should rename me Angry Michael in Birmingham. I'm angry again. This time about, you know, the benefits and...
Yes.
5 billion migrants claiming benefits or whatever it is. I mean, when is it going to be woken up? Well, the left know this, that all roads lead back to migration in this country. All of the problems, if you did like a fishbone analysis, like in management speak, it would come back one way or another, migration. It's costing us an absolute fortune. And it's ridiculous. I mean, and the spike, I haven't listened for the last hour, sorry, I've actually been in the meeting, but I don't know if you've covered that. You said there was a spike over the last couple of years. That probably coincided with the EU settlement scheme.
It could well have been. I mean, this was on universal credit specifically. The claimants have gone up by a third.
For it, you know, this is kind of like we just seem to be hemorrhaging money on migration one way or another. And one measure I would take, which may not be very popular, but a bit hard line, is that if you're in receipt of benefits, you shouldn't be able to send money abroad.
I think that would be perfectly reasonable. You couldn't send money abroad. I would agree with that. And the last guest we had on, by the way, said that, look, the cost of the welfare system hasn't really changed. And, you know, we're still getting value for money. It's pensioners that are causing the problem.
Yeah, what, the pensioners that have paid in all their lives?
Well, indeed. Indeed. 174 billion state pensions accounting for... that's the money accounting for state pensions. Listen, on that point, Michael, thank you very much indeed for that. Great comments and great anger as well. Appreciate it. Look after the balaclava as well. It's going to get cold over the next couple of weeks. 0344 499 1000 is where you'll find us. That question, what should foreign nationals be entitled to? By the way, Angela Rayner has spoken for the first time in the Commons since being fired. We'll bring you details coming next.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
We're wading through it. We're doing our best. We're bringing it to you like nowhere else will bring it to you. That's why it is the home of common sense. Lots to talk about. There's agreement, there's disagreement, there's all manner of debate going on, particularly around this figure. Nearly 1 in 10 universal credit claimants are foreign nationals. 770,000 people, with millions more receiving other benefits. In 2023, foreign national households got over 7.5 billion in universal credit. I appreciate you do have to define what is a foreign national household. It's not likely to be somebody who's just floated across the channel. But nonetheless, there is food for thought in this one. What should foreign nationals be entitled to? We'll continue to take your calls on that. Also this afternoon, the government's grooming gang inquiry is in turmoil after its chairman and several victims quit, saying survivors' voices are being ignored and key evidence may be lost. This hasn't even got up and running just yet, and it's falling apart already. The centre of all of this are hundreds or thousands of victims, young girls who are let down by every strand of the establishment in their young lives. Let's get this thing up and running, Jess Phillips and others. And Rachel Reeves is planning a £2 billion raid on lawyers, family doctors and accountants using limited liability partnerships. She's aiming to close that £30 billion gap in the public finances by targeting the wealthy. I mean, that's all well and good, Boomerang Rach, but what are you going to do next year when we're still brassing, when we're still looking around? Are you going to take the begging bowl round to the rich again? Just do it every year. Hey, that's the way to do it. Just tax the rich. That's not a philosophical, economic piece of wisdom. There's no plan there. That's called bottling it as a chancellor and just going for the easy route. We shall watch with interest. We've got to wait another month for a budget, for God's sake. I mean, Christmas trees will be up by the time she delivers the budget. And in fact, if the budget looks as we're expecting it, Christmas trees might well be coming down again. We shall watch with interest. So let's continue on this issue of grooming gangs. The inquiry, it seems, is in chaos, with the shortlisted chair, 3 abuse victims all stepping down. People who are now calling it a cover-up, condemning the inquiry's toxic atmosphere. Let's have a listen to Jess Phillips. She's in charge of safeguarding and violence against women and girls, which for many people is laughable given what is happening. Here's her statement on the inquiry.
The government remains resolute in delivering Baroness Casey's recommendations following her national audit into group-based child sexual exploitation and abuse. These crimes committed by grooming gangs are among the most horrific imaginable, and her report exposed over a decade of institutional inaction, and we are determined to ensure such failures are never repeated.
Such failures are never repeated. Let's speak with Lara Brown, commissioning editor over there at The Spectator. Lara, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
We're also hearing now as well that the only remaining candidate to lead the government's grooming gang inquiry has now withdrawn from the process as well. So, I mean, this thing is falling apart by the hour.
I think what is happening here is the grooming gang inquiry is falling apart because it was designed to fall apart. Let's go back to January, when grooming gangs really hit the news and it became clear to the government that they weren't going to get away without having an inquiry. We saw grooming gangs in the headlines of every paper. We saw Elon Musk intervening. We saw survivors begging for an inquiry after decades of inaction. Labour did nothing. Labour then commissioned Baroness Casey to do a rapid audit. I think widely accepted as a strategy to get out of having to do an inquiry. They thought looking at a few towns, reading a few reviews could get them out of it. Yeah. Baroness Casey said, no, this is far, far too bad. You have to have an inquiry. And from the moment that happened in June, the government has taken absolutely no action to actually find out what happened in these towns, who did it and who covered it up. Over the last few days, I've become very confident in saying that we are looking at a cover-up. The first concerning thing, we are 4 months from the commissioning of the inquiry. We do not have a scope, we do not have a terms of reference, we do not have a chair. That effectively means that no work has been done at all on investigating this issue. We're looking at something that will drag on for possibly a decade at this point. The last inquiry, which wasn't into grooming gangs, but into child sexual abuse, took 7 years.
This was the J inquiry, right?
Yes. This was Alexis J. ICSA for short, yeah. The second deeply concerning thing is the treatment of the survivors. The Labour government have asked women who have experienced child sex exploitation, organised grooming, to sit on a survivors panel and to advise on the grooming gang. And what we have seen in the last 2 days is 4 of those survivors from the panel resign, citing very similar reasons, and citing A, appalling treatment of survivors, a culture of secrecy, banning survivors from certain meetings, B, attempts to widen the scope beyond grooming gangs. And this is obviously a priority for Labour, because if you widen the scope, you will then remove the religious element. If you include things like child porn, abuse in care homes, sex between minors, you do all child exploitation or all child abuse, you end up with a much more murky picture, and you end up unable to tackle anything. Those are horrific crimes. They need to be dealt with, but this is not the inquiry to deal with them. And they also have talked about censorship of their own voice in public while the inquiry is going on. And that feels to me like an attempt to hush up survivors. I don't think 4 survivors resigning is a mystery. I don't think that, it can be a coincidence. And then the final deeply concerning thing is the treatment of survivors who have spoken out. So Fiona Goddard was the first survivor to come out and state that she had concerns. Jess Phillips then publishes a statement saying that Fiona Goddard is effectively claiming that she is lying, that there have been no attempts to widen the scope, that there have been no delays, no mistreatment of survivors, no secrecy. Fiona has now published a transcript of calls and emails and evidence that there was a concerted attempt to widen the scope beyond grooming and therefore not deal with grooming. So Jess Phillips, the safeguarding minister, who has spent decades saying that we should believe women and girls and not disbelieve them, who is in theory a campaigner for domestic abuse, has come out and claimed that a survivor of grooming is lying. And she's falsely claimed that. I think we're going to cover up. I think if Jess Phillips doesn't resign, then we've got absolutely no chance of having an inquiry with any legitimacy and with any meaningful results when it's any reports.
And is this, you mentioned at the very beginning about a cover-up. The short answer to that is it's not even the elephant in the room anymore, is that this is inconvenient because of racial and religious sensitivities. Is it as brutal as that?
I think there are 2 big reasons that Labour in particular are reluctant to do this. The first is that every serious piece of work done on grooming gangs, including Baroness Casey's report, have found a strong racial and cultural element of grooming. They have found a link with Islam, and they have often found an overrepresentation of Pakistani men in grooming. And Labour are very, very nervous about that information coming out. They're nervous about that causing protest, and they're nervous about allegations that their report is racist. But the second reason is if you research grooming gangs across the country, and if you look at the patterns we've been seeing since the 70s, it is completely unavoidable to find that where grooming has taken place in the most extreme ways, and where you have seen cover-ups by the local authorities, namely the police and the social services, there is a disproportionate representation of Labour councils. And there are a few cases, going back about 20 years, where you've seen Labour councillors have very close relationships with men who were arrested for grooming. Yeah. And I think Labour are very nervous about that coming to light. Yeah, and
because this, of course, is in many respects not just about the grooming itself and all that happened there, but of course it's the cover-up and the doors that were closed, the girls that were not believed, areas from educationalists to legal departments to social workers to law enforcement, these brick walls that the girls hit when trying to report it or were acting in a way that clearly was not conducive with justice, etc. I mean, the list is pretty endless. I mean, we all now know this, don't we? And one has to reasonably assume that the level of exposure on this for those institutions and the individuals that were running them is huge. I mean, it's as big as the grooming aspect itself.
From the small local inquiries we've had, particularly the inquiry looking at Manchester, Rotherham and Telford, it's become clear that there was an absolutely appalling level of institutional cover-up and, I think, complicity. A few examples that come to mind. There are numerous cases of girls going to police stations to report grooming and to name perpetrators. And before they had even left the police station, somebody had informed the perpetrators of the grooming that they had made accusations. And these girls would then be, attacked, assaulted, threatened, in some cases tortured by their perpetrators. A lot of inquiry chairs have indicated that there seems to be leaking from police forces. That needs to be further investigated. There are also cases of social workers placing the girls in their care into the hands of groomers. One social worker attended the wedding of an under-18 child to a man that was grooming her. Another social worker wrote on a girl's notes that she seemed to think that having an Asian boyfriend was like having a fashion accessory. The girl was 14, the boyfriend was an adult. This is an institutional cover-up. This is institutional complicity.
Yeah. I mean, how or by what measure are people like Jess Phillips not shouting this from the rooftops? I mean, what is going on when, I've seen Jess Phillips get animated about quite a lot of things, and bearing in mind her specific role and the role that she has apparently supported for years, you would imagine she'd be apoplectic with rage on this. And there just seems to be almost gritted teeth moments when she makes a statement. What's going on here?
It's hard to understand Jess Phillips' exact motivation. She seems to have chosen to let down these women and girls, and she seems to have decided that she only cares about the victims of assault by men when those perpetrators fit her political narrative. But I think one thing that is worth looking at is Jess Phillips' election campaign in July 2024. Jess Phillips almost lost her seat to a very concerted campaign by a Muslim independent who alleged that Labour was Islamophobic and focused a lot on the Gaza war. She very, very narrowly won. And she won after months of sustained abuse. I believe that the car tyres of some of her supporters were slashed. I believe her campaign she was defaced. I think she was threatened. And I wonder if she's very, very aware that her position in Parliament is contingent on maintaining support from the Muslim vote.
Just looking at this, and I mentioned a second ago that Jim Gamble, the former police officer who was the kind of last remaining candidate to perhaps lead this inquiry, has also withdrawn from the process. We have several key witnesses who've now withdrawn, victims who've now withdrawn. I mean, this has got to start again. I mean, this is beyond a mess now. There's no doubt about this, Lara. This is chaotic and then some. Someone has got to step in and say, sorry, Jess Phillips, this is not your bag. This has got to go to somewhere else. We've got to begin from scratch.
I think so. I think the way this inquiry has been conducted has pretty much guaranteed there will be no reckoning of perpetrators, and there will be no serious findings about why institutions were involved in the cover-up and why things weren't different, and therefore survivors won't get justice. An inquiry needs to be a few things. It needs to be statutory. It needs to have the powers to compel people to give evidence, like the COVID inquiry had, which previous inquiries haven't. They relied on voluntary evidence. It needs to be led by a judge, not a social worker, not a police officer, not someone from an institution that has been involved in a cover-up, a judge. And it also needs to be time-barred, because we can't afford to wait 7 years. There is a real urgency on this matter. We have been ignoring this issue for 25 years. We cannot ignore it for 7 more. Those things should be put in place and they should start again.
Do you think Jess Phillips will step down? What does your instinct tell you on this?
No, I don't. I think Jess Phillips will probably weather this. She shouldn't. But Labour are good at deflecting these issues. Yeah, spot on. Lara, great to have you on with us. Thank you. Brilliantly explained. Lara Brown, commissioning editor of The Spectator. It's kind of beyond parody, isn't it, that we would be in this place. It's an inquiry on grooming gangs. That's the parameters for this inquiry was grooming gangs, and then others trying to sort of expand that into other areas, which I don't think you have to be a top detective to at least wonder whether that somehow was designed to perhaps dilute
what would have been the central and the only point, grooming gangs. You start to bring in other factors and it becomes just another strand. This was specifically about grooming gangs, and the reason it was specifically about grooming gangs, not only was there a pattern, an industrial scale pattern over many, many years from men of a particular background, Muslim men of Pakistani origin in certain towns and cities around this country. Not only was there that, but there was this closed door wherever anybody looked. And in fact, the doors didn't just close on some of these girls. People behind those doors reopened them and told those girls to shut up and go away. In some cases, almost encouraging by definition those girls to go back to the very people that had abused them. They couldn't go to teachers, they couldn't go to law enforcement, they couldn't go to lawyers, they couldn't go to a social worker, for goodness sake. And when a social worker did raise this and say, look, I think something's going on, there's a bit of a correlation, there's a bit of a commonality around these perpetrators, that social worker was sent on a diversity course and told to shut up and behave herself. That's what we're dealing with here. Cops going round to a house where several young girls fell out of a front door, basically, all underage, and inside were a bunch of grown adult males. The girls were given a talking to about being drunk and disorderly, I think in one case arrested. Nothing happened to the blokes inside. I mean, what the hell? What is going on there? I just sense this is all too inconvenient for the government, because this blasts open not just the issue of, if you want to look at it as diversity or certain question marks over whether it was, you know, racially motivated or religiously motivated. That in itself is really, really uncomfortable for this government. But what is more uncomfortable for the whole establishment are the idea that agencies and organisations and individuals, people on impressive salaries with huge titles, who are making decisions that fundamentally meant that young girls did not get justice. And looking at this inquiry now, a group of those young girls have gone, this inquiry is not going to go where it needs to go, we're out of here. Looking at all the people they've tried to get to chair this inquiry, they're also out of here. No one is happy. It's fallen apart. It's a scene of chaos. There are victims who still need justice. And at the moment, Jess Phillips and Keir Starmer, these are the people running the game here, should grow a pair, including a backbone as well, and come out with it and say, this has been a disaster, we're starting from scratch, we want an experienced, independent judge who's not linked in any kind of way to any of the agencies that ordinarily would have been connected to this. We want an independent judge, let's go for it, and we will compel people to give evidence. 0344 499 1000. Comments on that, comments on the big issues that we've been discussing here. This is Talk.
blood was boiling just watching Boris Johnson defending himself. Oh, rub my hair. Oh, I didn't want to do anything, but I had to. We didn't know then what we know now.
I just find the whole scenario quite ridiculous now. Just to say, up till March this year, estimates £130 million the inquiry cost, and my current estimate is about £1 million a week. How come these people in power could use modelers to see the future, but they can't use common sense to see the obvious? And the obvious is they went too far.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 22 minutes after 2 o'clock. And this news just broke. Well, it's not really breaking news. It's of interest in many respects because Angela Rayner has been back in the House of Commons. No one's seen her for love nor money for the last few weeks after what happens. But she's spoken in the Commons using her resignation to speech to apologise for her tax scandal. Let's have a listen to what the former Deputy Prime Minister had to say.
The last few weeks have been incredibly tough on my family, with my personal life so much in the public eye. But I've always believed in the highest standards of transparency and accountability. And it is what the public expects, and it is the price we pay for the privilege of service. That's why I referred myself to the independent adviser and gave him access to all of the information he needed. I am, of course, corresponding with the HMRC, and they have my full cooperation. There is no excuse not to pay taxes owed, and I will do so. This was an honestly made mistake, but when you make a mistake, you take responsibility.
Go on, Ange! Gosh, she's good. You take responsibility. She's doing the right thing. I mean, in fairness, yeah, it wasn't a mistake, but regardless, it was a lot of things had to fall in place to write that off as just a mistake. Nonetheless, she's not coming back to this administration anytime soon, although maybe the administration is poorer without her, which gives you some measure for sheer entertainment value, if nothing else. But in charge of housing, no. In charge of anything, frankly, no. That's not her story. But we will watch with interest what happens to the career of Angela Rayner. Let's go back to your calls. We're talking about foreign nationals and benefits. Malcolm's in Warrington. Malcolm, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. Thanks for taking me call.
It's a pleasure, mate.
Listen to Talk. I spoke to you before. I've just listened to Angela Rayner there. Basically, she was one of the people that really annoyed me because she made a statement saying, the triple lock has increased the pension £400 a year. Yeah. It's less than £8 a week.
Yeah, let's get some context there, right?
Yeah, I've worked, left school at 15, worked 51 years. I get £227 a week. I pay all my bills, council tax, gas, electric, water, and it annoys me when people come on saying these migrants are only getting £49.50 a week, and they pay nothing.
So you get a quarter. You get a quarter of what you get for doing jack.
Yeah. It really does annoy me, and I'm thinking, what else do we have to do?
Well, nobody seems to... we've got a government that runs like a management team. They're more like civil servants than they are, politicians, philosophically driven politicians with a burning furnace of ideas in their belly, ready to go. We never hear that. We never hear animation. We never hear, really true... vibrant, meaningful, sometimes angry speeches from these people. We hear nothing.
No, they just want to give and give and give. If anything happened to me, they wouldn't come and give me anything. They just say, you've got your house, you pay for your house, and you've got to sell your house, and then if you come on difficulties. And it's people that just say, these poor migrants, they're only getting less than £50 a week, but they pay absolutely.
There's somebody I keep seeing posting on social media, and I tend to try and stay away from Twitter most of the time, because it's very helpful for our show when people send really useful comments and really good, well thought out responses to subjects. I love it for that, but beyond that it's a mess. And but I do see this one person. She constantly posts, in fact, she did it again just a couple of days ago. She says something like this, Malcolm. I'm going to have to say it again. When people talk about migrants, they live on £49 a week. Could you live on £49 a week? She always says, and it's like, but they're not living on 49 quid a week because you're not paying for anything else. I mean, the whole package is another grand at least.
Yeah, it's more than what we get. And then people come on and say, pensioners are a drain on the society. I've paid in for 51 years. Never been out to work, never claimed anything, and I'm a drain. Anyway, sorry about that.
No, I hear you. Yeah, you're the worst. You're the worst kind of person, Malcolm. How dare you work diligently and not sponge anything, and then be given 200 and odd quid a week for your troubles. It's a scandal.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure, Malcolm. Lovely to speak with you. Thank you, mate. Chris is in Bournemouth. What have you got for us, Chris? What are your thoughts?
Right, Ian.
Yes.
I'm quite surprised that people are surprised why we're in this condition that we're in with the Labour Party.
Yep.
I was saying, just before the last general election, people were saying, get the Labour Party in, they'll make a difference. And my answer to that was, be careful what you wish for. And remember the Tony Blair years.
Yeah.
Just they did the same thing.
They were never going to make a difference, really, were they, though?
No. One other thing before you go in.
Yes.
And I'm being serious when I say this, right? Is Sadiq Khan actually telling Keir Starmer what he can and can't say as regards Islamists?
Well, they would... Both of those men would go, well, of course he isn't. But are you sensing that there is something going on there?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes, I am.
OK. We'll leave that point hanging. Chris, thank you very much indeed. Again, Sadiq Khan, another lawyer, a man who I just don't think some of these guys on the left, it's always the case, even when there are terrorist attacks, and most terrorist attacks in recent times have been carried out by Islamists, and we emphasise the last bit of that word, politicised Islam. And I know, a whole different ball game from, Islam, and some refute that and go, no, it's all the same thing. Well, it clearly isn't, because I don't know any decent person who happens to be a Muslim who goes, yeah, 7/7 was the right thing to do, or October 7th was the right thing. I don't know anyone who sings from that hymn sheet. However, there is a group, but the left, the kind of Owen Jonesy, Sadiq Khan-y, Corbyn-y kind of left, they can never bring themselves to full condemnation of this. They scatter like mice when asked about this. They just can't. There was a brilliant piece by Christopher Hitchens, the late Christopher Hitchens, who was not always the Oracle of Delphi, but he was a very good, measured, intelligent voice on so many things. And he put it rather simply when asked that very question. He said that there's parts of the left, many parts of the left, they cannot bring themselves to condemn a brown person. And it sounds a rather kind of blunt and some would say fairly crude way to put it, but it genuinely is that. Absolutely. Their hardwired leftism is so firmly welded that they just can't go there on this stuff. And I think when Sadiq Khan, asked by Susan Hall multiple times about grooming gangs and the like, trying to get her to sort of almost say what he wanted her to in terms of who was responsible, she wasn't falling into that trap. I think Khan is absolutely in there. I think he's the person that will go, no, it's nothing to do with this. Proportionately, you'll find. I don't have any trouble in understanding that the average paedophile in this country is a white person. I know that. But that, in this case, is not what we're talking about. When we were looking at sex abuse and child sexual abuse, exploitation in the Catholic Church, it was fundamental that you mentioned the background and the religion of the people that were connected to it. And in many cases, people who used their religion, they certainly used it in order to prey on young people. That was the whole point of probably of signing up to that world in the first place. But many, I think, felt they had a sort of an ecclesiastical green light to abuse. And this is similar. So this is one aspect of child sex exploitation. Happens to be grooming gang. Lots of other aspects, we all get it, we all understand it, but this one not only went, and the difference, by the way, the big difference is that in most areas you would see an avalanche of law enforcement, doors being smashed in, people being handcuffed, taken into custody, if they were trying to cover it up, if they were connected in any kind of way. That is what makes this also a bit different. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. This one from Tim in Suffolk. Good to hear Raina say she cocked it up. Now we need to hear Starmer say it. Never. Yeah, it's a fair point, isn't it? Let's move to a story we've looked at many times over the last few weeks. In fact, we've looked at it many times over the last few years, but seems to take another turn each time or each day. Brits worried that Keir Starmer's digital ID card plans won't stop illegal immigration or people smuggling, warning they could be bypassed and create more red tape for legal residents. Experts doubt their impact on overstayers, and opponents fear privacy risks there are risks of privacy without real benefits. Let's speak with Andrew Orlowski, columnist at The Telegraph, and we've spoken to Andrew a few times on this issue. Good to have you with us again. I mean, this is kind of like sort of tell us something we didn't know territory, isn't it? I mean, it was always almost a juvenile idea to suggest, oh, this is all about keeping the country safe, digital ID. It's going to stop the immigrants, which was a load of cobblers to begin with.
Yeah, I don't think they realised what they were getting into. I'm one of very few journalists who reads every report that the Tony Blair Institute produces, and they're not technical people. They hire them. These reports are written by kind of really quite junior staff, just come out of McKinsey for a year or two. They they assume that everything is working fine, that they could slip it in, essentially rebrand the system we've already got called One Login, and everything would be fine. They'd slip out this announcement on a Friday afternoon. It was done in 26 seconds, and now they're in a world of pain. This One Login system is not secure.
And this sort of, concern that Brits have, I mean, it's completely natural concern. In fact, it coupled in many respects with some outrage as well. I mean, I know they've talked about this kind of stuff for years, and but given the potential implications of this, you can't really overstate how big a story this is, Andrew.
I mean, in Britain, it completely changes as me and many other of your guests will have said. It changes the relationship between the citizen and the state. Estonia is always flying politicians and policymakers over, but Estonia has always kind of it's always been, it's been an independent state for, I think, a few decades over the last 1,000 years. It's used to having surveillance. It's very pleased with its system. But again, it's Estonia gets hacked and it's way more secure than the One Login system is.
Well, where do you sense, in terms of this getting debated in the House of Commons, we could get to a point, hopefully, where this never happens because another government comes in and says, no, we're not choosing this. But there is always a belief that this is kind of bigger than any one government and this will happen regardless. What's your take on that?
That it will happen regardless? Yeah. I think David Davis MP wrote a letter to the National Audit Office yesterday, highlighting some of the work I've been doing at the Telegraph. This system that is already live has 12 million people on it, called One Login. That's the basis of digital ID. Was hacked in March, and the hackers hacked in March by a friendly team, we should say a red team exercise. It's called. It's kind of a stress test. You get people to try and ambush the system to see where its weak points are.
Sure.
They took control of the code base without being detected at all. They could have planted anything in there, malware, backdoors or so on. And they also took control of the infrastructure, the Amazon Web Services, which went out of, a lot of fell over earlier in this week. So, David Davis says the government is ignoring fundamental flaws in the underlying technology. Yeah. There needs to be a code freeze. And I think this is our best bet. People's best bet of halting digital ID is to look at the catastrophe that awaits us if we continue with One Login. We just don't know what's in the system. Yeah. Hasn't been independently verified, and that will take us to the end of this Parliament. And I think many Labour MPs, rather than having a mass identity theft on their hands, will want to do that eventually.
A party like Reform UK would say that this wouldn't happen under our watch. There are a lot of predictions that they may well win the next election. So would that be it then, done and dusted? Or is it, as I mentioned a second ago, Andrew, is this so big that reform will be forced almost? I know it sounds a bit conspiratorial, but we're forced to sort of adopt it, even if it's done in a sort of reworded, watered down form?
Well, the people who want this never give up. This is the thing. And it's become an obsession with them. It was the vaccine passport before it was digital ID for participating in the workforce. It will be something else tomorrow. They never give up. But the fact is, we're quite happy with multiple IDs that aren't linked. If I use a service once and I forget the password and when I need to use it again, that's no big deal. There is really no inconvenience for us in having 3 or 4 main IDs. Yeah. And I'm a lot happier than not having one that's a honeypot for hackers.
Indeed, and particularly if you look
at all the others together.
Yeah, I was going to say, particularly if you look at how phone companies, I'm thinking of people like Apple and Google, how they facilitate multiple passwords for things in a very effortless way these days. So there's ways of doing it. It doesn't really take very much. And in fact, if you look at passkey technology and your face or your feet, there's ways of doing it. It doesn't cause any hassle. I've got probably about 120 passwords out there, maybe even more for different things, because you're forever subscribing to something. And it really does. There was a time when it was a pain in the backside, but I don't think somebody's come up with digital ID to make life easier for me, have they?
No, they haven't. It's entirely for the benefit of the bureaucrats that they start to think, well, we can do all these things if we have one identifier for every citizen. It's never for our benefits. It's always for the convenience of the bureaucrats who think they can impose order on the world. Yeah. So keep saying, make a chaotic world orderly through a single identity.
Even if I was just going to add, Andrew, that even if Labour miraculously won the next election and it all started to go through, this is incredibly expensive. The evidence to suggest its efficacy is so wobbly that it's laughable in terms of what is being suggested in terms of its use, etc. What realistically then, when would it be there for us if it did go ahead? Because you could be looking at something that is the best part of another 10 years.
No, this is what people don't realise. It's here now. They're not building a new system, and they're not planning to build a new system. We're already in this system. It's called One Login, and it's not secure. So 12 million people are on it already. I think it's trebled since the spring, largely thanks to making it mandatory for Companies House, and it becomes completely mandatory next month. I mean, as of last Monday, you have to do your web filings using a one login identity. And then there's a wallet, which they've already demonstrated. They demonstrated it back in January, and that's going to be rebranded BritCard. So it's already here. The penalties of not complying are really severe. If you're a company director, they will fine you. And remember, the state can take money out of your bank account now, and you'll lose that company. So it's really not like the poll tax where tens of thousands of people disappeared. I lived in a part of Manchester where there was nobody on the electoral roll.
Indeed, that's right. I mean, you say 12 million people. Are we talking about companies and businesses in that respect?
12 million identities have been created, and a large part of that is as the drive to get everybody filing on Companies House, corporate company information and through it. The next big step is benefits and HMRC. But this is a live system, and this is what I'm trying to convey is so important. It's an insecure live system that hackers can take control of without being detected. Identity fraud completely messes up your life. You cannot prove to the bank you are who you say you are. Your bank account's been drained. You'll have lost your house through identity fraud. This is a massive kind of, the Titanic sails onto this iceberg way before we have to worry about social credit. We've got this enormous iceberg in front of us. And I think, the powers that be need to halt and freeze this project immediately.
Yeah, well, let's see where it goes in the next couple of years. It's going to be fascinating. Andrew, let's catch up again because this thing is developing by the day, as I said at the beginning. Andrew Olowetsky, who is the columnist at The Telegraph, who was right across that story, he's been relentless in, as he said, all that stuff that... and that is the difference between journalists and good journalists who bother to read the stuff that many people don't. So if you want to wade through all the stuff that comes from the Tony Blair Institute and anyone else that has been advocating for this for so long, he's your man because he does it, and he does it brilliantly. That is the latest. 12 million people already on the list. This is when they pretty much compelled sort of company directors and the like to be registered in that sort of one password kind of way. What is your take or sense on that? Because if reform came in, Nigel Farage said, I can't remember the exact quote, but he would, go to jail, I think he said. Go to jail rather than have digital ID. Of course, it's not about the convenience. The convenience feels rather good. It's fantastic. Who doesn't get a little twinge of satisfaction when you buy a ticket for something or whatever, whether it's your train or whether you go to the cinema and it says, do you want to pop this into your wallet? And the little QR code gets tucked in there nicely and you click the button and up it pops. And I can see the convenience of that. Your passport, your driving licence, of course, at that level, it makes sense. But that is not the debate. That is not the discussion that is at stake here. Let's go to Mark in Sheffield. Back to that issue of benefits and our welfare system. Mark, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. Thanks for having us on.
Pleasure.
Great show as usual.
Thank you.
Basically, I was in the military for 15 years. I got medically discharged in 2005. Came out of the army. My dad had just died. I was going through a divorce. I had nowhere to live. Waiting for my pension to be sorted out because of the divorce. So I went to try and sign on and get housing as well, and I was told that they couldn't help me because my pension was £18 a year too much.
Wow.
And I wasn't actually getting my pension at the time because my divorce wasn't settled. And so, yeah, basically I was sofa surfing. I was classed as homeless. They put me in a Salvation Army for a couple of nights. Yeah, it was a nightmare. Basically, I'd served my country 15 years and they wouldn't even help me out.
Yeah.
And then you get guys...
I mean, does that... It can't be... I mean, the feeling of that, the fact that you were, had served your country, that can't have been lost on you. You weren't expecting special privileges, but
No,
you
I
were
wasn't expecting anything at all.
But you were expecting recognition and support, right?
I was just after, I was basically just after somewhere to live, and I could have, I was under the mental health with PTSD at the time, and I was lost. I was completely lost. Luckily, I had good friends that put me up, but yeah, the first night in the Salvation Army was like I just felt like I was abandoned by everyone and everything.
How long were you in the forces for?
15 years.
15 years serving your country, life on the line. Not, when I say life on the line, I'm not trying to overstate it, but ultimately that's what you sign up for, that you would put your life on the line. All of that, and I'm sure you saw some stuff that you'd rather not have seen, and everything that goes with it, and you end up in a Salvation Army hostel.
Yeah. You just feel
mate, that's just absolutely outrageous. I've always said anyone that served in the military, unless you did 2 weeks and got fed up with it, but anyone who had a career in the military, there should be something agreed on the fact that you sign up to serve that means you are looked after in a very different way from many others. I really believe that.
Luckily these days there's lots of charities, and British Legion helped me out quite a lot, but there was only the British Legion really in them days, and there wasn't all these charities are gone now, and it's a lot more help out there, but at the time there was nothing like that there is now, and it was, like I said, I felt so lost and abandoned. And now I see these people coming over on these boats and getting put in these
hotels, and you're in the Salvation Army Lodge, and the others are in the Four Seasons.
Yeah. It's absolutely disgusting.
It's criminal. It's absolutely criminal.
And basically, it was a Labour government, Labour council that did this to us as well. So I would never vote Labour ever in my life, never, ever, from the way I was treated.
Yeah. And rightly so. Mark, thank you, mate. I wish you loads of luck, and I know that always sounds a bit empty and daft, but I genuinely mean that. You do that for a living for 15 years, Afghanistan, Northern Ireland, wherever you happen to be posted, and ultimately you will do whatever is required, even giving your life for your country. I mean, people use that phrase, but when you really stop and think about it, wow, it's not like we haven't lost military personnel in recent years fighting for this country. And then you end up in a Salvation Army hostel. Or you could float across the channel and go into a 4-star hotel. I mean, that's not a right-wing point. When people protest about immigration, that's not overstating it. That's the bloody reality. That's the indignity. That's the criminality of our system. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
became quite fearful, really, of describing what ethnicity our abusers were, and it should never get to that. The lady that was running the panel along with the Home Office, she was an ethnic minority ambassador, so I don't believe personally that she was ever pro-victims, pro-survivors in this case. Everyone that's on these panels are very biased. They're not impartial. I think it was a way to find out what survivors knew, what they were going to raise, and how they could cover it up in the future.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
We'll do the voice of doom in just a second. Debbie in Devon makes a great point, says, you mentioned how our politicians are just like civil servants. I agree 100%. I recently went to my first meeting at the local branch of Reform, and you'd be hard-pushed to meet more organised and enthusiastic people that have a real fire in their bellies for government and have come from all walks of life. There are elected councillors speaking, and they spoke so eloquently and were really approachable. They've given me hope where previously there was none. That's great to hear, Debbie, and it's so true. I mean, it's true. Doesn't matter whether you're a Reform supporter or not, it is true. In fact, if I was a Green Party supporter, I might be feeling the same thing. Because that Zach Polanski, whose real name is Mick Jones or something, not from The Clash, but you take the point. I mean, they've got a bit of fire in their belly these days because he's sort of doing populism, but green populism. And you're probably liking it. But the two main parties who are like the civil servants, they act like civil servants. They don't act with any kind of wind in their sails or fire in their belly or, you know, real philosophical drive. They don't get annoyed about stuff. They kind of sort of defer things. They never say, you know, this is a national scandal. This is not going to happen on my watch. I'll get to the bottom of it. It's always these pre-prepared press releases written by some divvy spad somewhere who's knocked it up and they've just read it out. That's the bit that's missing. It's the 21st century, Westminster. We want something different. Before we go back to the calls, Voice of Doom. So day 5, I think it might be, day 5 of the Voice of Doom. It's a mystery voice, but it's political, isn't it? Who is this?
Because it's based on a deception.
Who is that? I know what it sounds like, but it's not, and they're not political anyway. Sounds a bit like Rob Brydon, doesn't it? Can we hear it again?
Because it's based on a deception.
Yeah, it really does. It's not Rob Brydon. If you think you know, 87222, 87222. We'll tell you after the news, but only if we get a right answer. Here it is again.
Because it's based on a deception.
There it is. We'll go back to your calls now. Don't go away, Matt. This is Rudy in Bristol. Rudy, what have you got for us?
Well, it's like when Joe was talking about people coming over here to work and how much it's costing us in benefits, and I think we should use the same system as the UAE, which is you're coming there to work, so you're not entitled to any benefits, and if you lose your job and you don't get one within 30 days, you have to leave. And it works there. They don't have a problem with people wanting to work there. It's no doom and gloom for them. If people want to come here to work, they come here to work and earn money. But it doesn't mean they should be entitled to benefits, you know, if that's what they want to do. And the other thing is this, Ian, right, which I want to point out. A lot of people, even like my brother now, can't get jobs because of the cost of the national insurance going up for the employer. So what they're doing is, because they did this seedy little deal with India, the employer, if he employs someone from India, he doesn't have to pay employers' national insurance, and the person doesn't have to pay national insurance.
Right, yes, that's right. They've got.
So who's he going to employ?
Of course. Yeah, well, that's a great example, isn't it, of a government going, oh, yeah, we've got to do this deal with India because they're a big economy and they're doing really well. So we'll kind of agree to anything, but spectacularly forgetting what it means for the country on a wider kind of point.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we should do exactly what they do with the UAE. It's like my brother worked there for 15 years. You know, if you don't get a job, you've got to go. You've got to pay for everything. You don't get any benefits. There's no unemployment. There's no nothing. You're there to work, and that's why you're coming. And that's the message it should be.
Spot on. Rudy, great call. Thank you very much indeed for that. Dean says, Ian Collins says it's fascinating that the government can take what they want from your bank account. Fascinating, it's downright scary. I hope I didn't say that. If I did, I certainly wasn't, because it's flipping horrific. Fascinating, maybe facetiously, but yeah, if I did, then I absolutely should have used a far stronger term. When I was talking to Andrew Olowski, the guest from The Telegraph a second ago. Yeah, the idea that you could just dip in and we'll take the money and explain later, which isn't an approach most citizens are given. But again, this is kind of Starmer all over. And don't get me wrong, I think this ID card thing would have absolutely been put onto the table had Rishi Sunak been the Prime Minister and won the last election. Stephen says, I was forced to join One Login when renewing my driving licence. Never realised it was the new digital ID. Well, that's the bit I'm not sure about, because there is the government gateway system, which is kind of one. So if you're doing VAT or conventional tax, all of that is in one place. And I'm trying to remember if, when I last renewed my driving, passport was last year. Was that the same login? Quite possibly. It did ask me when I renewed my passport if I wanted to use the photograph that I'd supplied for my driving licence. And I didn't. But nonetheless, the option was, so it's all interconnected, but that's just one aspect. You can make that make sense in a weird way. I don't know whether I was subscribing to digital ID without even knowing about it. Thank you very much indeed for that, Steve in Essex. More from you on the way. 0344 499 1000. That's where you'll find us. Lots to come in the next hour, including hopefully an answer to the voice of doom. Here's the voice.
Because it's based on a deception.
87222 if you know. Right now you're listening to Talk. The time is 3 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Home of Common Sense. As we've been discussing, nearly 1 in 10 universal credit claimants are foreign nationals. Now, putting aside people who've lived here for yonks and pay their taxes and stuff like that, just happen to have been born somewhere else, then that does leave some severe question marks. Millions more receiving, 770,000 people receiving other benefits as well. In 2023, foreign national households got £7.5 billion in universal credit alone. Chunk it down, what does it mean? And how or who or what should foreign nationals actually be entitled to? Also this afternoon, as we've been discussing, the grooming gangs inquiry is in crisis after both frontrunners to chair it, that was Jim Gamble, former cop, and Annie Hudson, withdrew amid mounting criticism. The government is now scrambling to find a replacement. Baroness Louise Casey is stepping in to help. Ministers insist there will be no hiding place for abusers, but the probe's future remains uncertain. They couldn't organise a you-know-what in a brewery, this lot. And a pub in Greater Manchester is banning man bags, tracksuits and stonewashed jeans to boost standards and attract more families. The landlord of the Millgate pub says it's about keeping order, but the rules have sparked local debate as more British pubs enforce stricter dress codes. I mean, it does depend on, we are going to look at this a little later in the hour, it does depend on what you define as a man bag, doesn't it? And the tracksuit thing, etiquette, what you wear, does it matter? We will investigate all of this. There was a point, I don't know what it is, but there was a period, and Finn, our producer, might have been part of this period. I have no idea, but I don't see it so much now. But teenage boys, 14, 15, wearing grey tracksuit bottoms with a very weird desire to put their hands down their pants while standing in the street. What was that about? Do you know the look, Finn? Was that... You've got to have shorts underneath, but no need to grab hold of your Charlies, is there, while you're standing outside Boots? I mean, come on, be fair. It's always a bit of a weird thing. It's always like some grimy, smelly teenager standing there at the ticket office and everyone's queuing up. A mate is there, stock-taking in his underpants. I mean, good Lord. So I get that. Scruffiness, going to the theatre in trainers and casual wear, jeans and trainers. That was once upon a time a big no-no, wasn't it? Do people dress up for the theatre now? Finn, if you went to the theatre, would you wear a suit? Would you wear a pair of trainers and a tracksuit? You see, he looked at me like we're disgusted. No. You know, when he's going to see one of his Greek tragedies at the National. Quarter zip and suit trousers last time. Well, that works. I do think there's a little bit of, there's a time and a place for everything, isn't there? Where you dress, how you dress, etc. And at some stage, we've all got it a little bit wrong, and I suppose you can get it wrong when you're a bit younger. People do wear weird stuff. Seeing some fat old geezer in a pub garden with a beer belly that's in another postcode is not a good look. I just happen to think that is tantamount to disrespect. And you'd have to apply that to a woman wearing what you'd call inappropriate. There is such a thing as inappropriate dress. Can we just call it out when we see it? Come on. I mean, if you're wearing a skirt that looks more like a belt, then, there might be question marks to be had about that, particularly if you work at a shoe shop. 0344 499 1000. Lots to get through. Voice of Doom. Hopefully we got an answer. We'll give you that detail in a second. More calls from you on the way. And this, Donald Trump cancelling his planned meeting with Vladimir Putin in Budapest due to a deadlock over Ukraine. Russia refusing to freeze front lines or agree on a ceasefire. Previous talks achieved little. Reports claim Trump urged Zelensky to cede eastern regions for peace, but it hasn't gone well there, and it's not going well on the other side of the argument, it seems. Let's chat to Bob Seeley, military expert, former MP, of course. Bob, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. Good afternoon to your listeners, viewers.
Nice to have you with us. So what is going... This is the sort of, more than the Gordian knot of the day. I mean, Israel, that's still precarious, what's happening there. There was some hassle at the weekend. That wasn't, great. But a lot of clear positivity coming out of that. This whole Ukraine thing seems to be in a very different place in terms of getting two sides to agree on anything.
Yeah, I mean, look, the problem is that I know it's a slightly depressing thing to say, so I apologize to your listeners and viewers. The reality is that President Putin doesn't want peace. If he wanted peace, he could stop his army attacking Ukraine. What he wants is Ukraine to surrender, or he wants to keep on fighting. Personally, I'm quite surprised that he pulled out of the meeting, because I think he overplayed his hand with the Americans early in the year, and I assume that what he would try to do would be to string Trump along, maybe to get him to pressure the Ukrainians even more, to get more concessions. But Putin is showing so little respect to Trump that he can't even be bothered to do that. So even before he is demanding more stuff, he's basically telling Lavrov, his foreign minister, that he can't be bothered to meet. So I think the right now the Russians aren't even bothering to engage, and their conditions stay as unacceptable as they were to the Ukrainians and presumably to NATO, everyone else, as they were earlier in the war.
It's often said, and I'm sure there's complete truth in this, when it comes to concessions and the like, that it's all very well conceding, but you've got to look as if you've won something. Putin's not just going to walk away with his tail between his legs saying, well, I was hoping to get this, but unfortunately, guys, I didn't succeed. Sorry. He needs to walk away looking jubilant and victorious in this.
Yeah, I mean, up to a point. Okay, he controls. I mean, that's a very good point. Ian. Okay, he controls the media. So even if he lost, he could potentially sell it as a victory. How many people would believe him or not is another matter. I think at a basic level, if he takes the whole of the Donbass area, which is these provinces of, they're called Lugansk and the other one's called Donetsk, and if he does that by next summer, he's got most of it, but not all of it. He could potentially say that's our victory, and I'm going to pocket that at least for the next year or two. And this isn't a victory, Ian, that he's proclaiming over Ukraine. It is a victory over NATO. This is styled in Russia as a NATO-Russia war, that he is fighting NATO's proxy, Ukraine, in Ukraine, because NATO was planning to invade Russia. We all know that's nonsense, but that's not the point. So he could potentially sell that as a victory. So when you say, you know, what's a victory for him, it's negotiable. Likewise, you could say, what is a victory for Ukraine? Is it survival?
Yeah. Well, I was going to mention exactly that as well, Bob, in terms of, you know, we know that, or we understand that Trump had urged Zelensky to cede certain eastern regions of the country. Is Zelensky up for any of that, do you think?
Well, I was actually having a lunch with a former Ukrainian soldier who's been injured 3 times, and he's been honourably discharged. And the problem is that the Ukrainians are not minded to give up their territory, because they still hold it. Secondly, because the territory they are giving up in the western bits of Donetsk region are potentially quite valuable from a geographical point of view, because they're sort of not mountainous, but they're hilly. And once you go over those hills, effectively you've got a flat run all the way through to Kiev, a few hours drive away. So geographically, actually, there is a defensive value for keeping that territory. And thirdly, Ukrainians don't believe that Putin will stop. He will pocket that. There'll be peace of sorts for a few months, and then there'll be some provocation, which will be staged by Putin and his, henchmen, and then there'll be another round of war. And so the Ukrainians will be giving up territory that they have lost lots of lives over. Nothing.
Is there an answer to it then? I mean, we can all be armchair generals, but nonetheless, is there an obvious, not so much staring us in the face, because we all understand that this is clearly incredibly difficult and delicate for lots of different reasons, but is there a sort of widely believed way through this?
Yeah, I mean, the most likely widely believed way through is simply a stalemate. That until there is more game-changing technology on the battlefield or a physical human breakthrough of front lines in either direction, what you're going to get is a messy stalemate that turns slowly into a more lasting stalemate. That depends on Putin being willing to give up his ambition of destroying Ukraine, frankly destroying NATO if he gets the chance, and achieving his range of goals in Ukraine, which is effectively he wants to be able to conquer it more easily next time. So he wants Ukraine to give up its army. He wants to get rid of Zelensky as a president because he wants to try to put a puppet president there, etc., etc. But if there is a foreseeable end to this war in the foreseeable future, it is just that it grinds to a stalemate.
Let's just move to this story, Bob, while you're with us. Hearing today 100 British troops or thereabouts have been deployed to Israel to help monitor the Gaza ceasefire. This was at the request of the United States. Is that about right? Were you expecting something like that? Is this normal procedure in something like this? Not that it happens every day.
Yes. Okay, look, I actually think that we should be staying very well clear of this conflict. I have huge amounts of sympathy with Palestinians caught up in it. It is not a genocide, and most of these pro-Hamas campaigners in this country, they just need a vehicle to hate people. And you know what's the oldest hate in one of the oldest hates in the world? It's anti-Semitism. So I have very little time for this. I think we should be not funding UNRWA anymore because it was Hamas controlled, or very certainly Hamas influenced, and actually the less we have to be doing with this conflict the better, because I don't think it's going to bring anything. I think it is fantastically intractable, and there are many other things that we should be spending time, effort and money on. Having said that, and I suspect the overwhelming majority of your listeners will say, yeah, we shouldn't have anything to do with this at all, and stay there a bit. The only thing I would say, look, if the Americans are our closest allies, if they're saying, look, please help, you've got some expertise here, we need you to come in and do a bit of work with us, it'll be useful for an international coalition, then, and actually the Brits are good at planning, and I understand that this is a planning contingent, and we're good at doing civil military coordination, etc. Sure. That's what we're coming in to help for. Fine. But actually, I would really like our soldiers not to be put in harm's way, because a British soldier's life is not worth anything that's going on in Gaza right now.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on. Bob, thank you as ever. Great to have you on with us. Bob Seeley, military expert, former Conservative MP. Thank you to him. Some other breaking news. This is reference Channel migrants. The number of migrants who've arrived in the UK so far this year after crossing the Channel has passed the total for the whole of 2024. So in 2024 as a whole, nearly 37,000 people were detected making the crossing, 25% more than in 2023. As of earlier today, Channel migrants since Keir Starmer became Prime Minister, 59,971. And you can bet your life, reasonably calm waters today. That's just gone over a totemic 60,000. For 2025 only, 36,729. Number of crossings in September. These are the figures, recent figures, 5,079. Migrants crossing in October, 2,647. So these are incredible numbers. And if this doesn't, well, it won't do much really, because what you'd have thought at one time this would all make the front pages. But it's happening so regularly, so every day, that nobody's really bothering anymore to talk. We talk about it because we think it's really, really important for a number of reasons, economic if nothing else. However, it does seem to sort of slide into the any other business department of the newspapers these days. Back to your callers, back to your calls. Matt's in Cheshire on that issue of migration. Firstly, Matt, good afternoon to you.
Hi, very good afternoon, Ian. I actually rang about the grooming gangs, if I'm honest.
Yep.
What you said earlier about the political class, they have not only do they have an air of entitlement, they have a life of entitlement. Mm-hmm. Anybody who joins the Labour Party or the Conservative Party thinks it's just like a pathway to constant involvement in politics. And they've never been challenged until now. That's why you got behaviour like Jess Phillips yesterday, like a petulant child stamping her feet.
Yep.
And it's my view, Ian, that Labour are gaslighting us to basically create enough time so they can destroy all evidence of what's happened previously in the last 2 decades. They can delete files from computers.
Yep.
They can rip up old files. The police can do the same. That's why we keep being told things are happening, but nothing is happening. So somebody somewhere with some power should say, why are they allowed to take this long, and what are they doing in the meantime?
Who do they respond to? Who do they answer to on this, though? I mean, how do they even, they are the government, so there's nothing really other than people like us, and you can say in an interview to Keir Starmer or Jess Phillips, this is taking too long, this is outrageous, etc. But there's no higher authority you can go to, as it were.
Well, there's obviously something wrong with our constitution and our political system in that case, then, isn't there? Because if they're going out of their way to cover up their own evil acts from previous decades, and there's only them that are in charge of it, how is that possible? And the police may be implicated as well, so they're not going to call the bluff on themselves, are they?
Well, it's certainly not in that respect, no, they're not. But they've got to get this absolutely right, haven't they? Because so much rests on this. I mean, this is so big that it can't just disappear. It's big for grooming gang victims, but it's also big for what it says about our establishment and how cover-ups can occur. I mean, this is, we saw it with the Catholic Church, the cover-ups, people that were then promoted by the Pope himself when they'd been, caught clearly red-handed abusing children. So we know that cover-ups in big institutions happen, but you'd have thought by now we'd have learnt our lesson. But I don't know if we ever do on that one, Matt.
Do you know what I used to think when I was younger, Ian, that we were like a beacon of decency compared to America, and that we were more honest and decent, and the odd bad thing happened, but we were just generally much better.
Yeah.
What I now think is we're just much better at covering up lies than they are.
Yeah.
And they've got a giant legal system that can tear people to shreds in the courts.
Yeah, I think you might be right on that. Matt, great call. You've raised some brilliant points, and there's more for debate on exactly that. 0344 499 1000. I should just add, by the way, I gave you those migrant figures a moment ago. But in terms of the numbers, at least one of those numbers was an additional person that crossed the channel who had already been sent back in the one-in, one-out scheme. So he was part of that stat. He got deported. Sorry, mate, you're a wrong, and off he went to France, nipped on a coach, went to Calais, presumably paid somebody a few quid, and came back again on a boat. I mean, you can't write this kind of stuff. Jeez. 0344 499 1000. Ian, Lara Brown's account of the complicity of authorities in the Muslim child grooming was staggering. I've been reading The Spectator for decades and know the high calibre of their reporting. No wonder Labour doesn't want the full extent of this abuse and corruption to come out. It's up to you guys in the press to expose it to the sunlight. Yeah, Lara Brown was our guest at the beginning of the last hour, who was just brilliant and forensic in how she'd looked into this and what had gone wrong. This whole thing needs to start again, and you've got to get rid of central players, and Jess Phillips is frankly surplus to requirements on this one for a whole number of reasons. Let's do the voice of doom. This was the voice that we played you just before the news.
Because it's based on a deception.
So that is the political mystery voice. These are some of the guesses. Robin Cook, no. Well, no, it's not. I kind of know. Geoffrey Clifton Brown, no. Tim Smith, no. Dennis McShane, it is not. Danny Kruger, no. Theresa May. Oh, hang on. Can we hear it again?
Because it's based on a deception.
It is Theresa May. It was after that throat infection. No, of course it's not Theresa May. But, interesting guess. We didn't get a winner. It rolls over to tomorrow. Voice of Doom back right here on Talk at around about 2:45 on the programme tomorrow. We're back with more calls and comments from you in a couple of moments. Our lines are open. This is Talk.
we became quite fearful, really, of describing what ethnicity our abusers were, and it should never get to that. The lady that was running the panel along with the Home Office, she was an ethnic minority ambassador, so I don't believe personally that she was ever pro-victims, pro-survivors in this case. Everyone that's on these panels are very biased. They're not impartial. I think it was a way to find out what survivors knew, what they were going to raise, and how they could cover it up in the future.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
3:25 right here on Talk. We go back to more of your comments, and there's loads of them. This in from Colin, who says, I'm 58, managed my whole life to get everything I need for the day in my pockets. From a catapult and gobstoppers when I was a kid to phone, fags and money. Ban the bag. This is about man bags. You see, this is my problem. If I go out with the kids, there's always like if you go to a park or a day out, there's a rucksack involved because you've got a couple of water bottles at least. You're not going to stick those in your flipping pockets, are you? You might get some funny looks if you gave that a go. But then there's all the other stuff. Like if it's the summer, you've got your sunglasses, you've got your car keys, you've got your wallet. Where are you going to put all of that stuff? So you can stick it in a rucksack. But if you're not going out with the kids and you just want to go out, I mean, a man might need a bag. But they are controversial, even when I use such an appliance. I'm always aware. It's like, does this look do I look like a... There's a bit of that goes on. James down in London. James, what have you got for us? Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. Great show again.
Thank you.
Ian, I've just called up just to say that this grooming gang fiasco is a national stain. Great Britain was created in 1707, and I can't see a bigger stain on our nation in our 318 years as the United Kingdom of Great Britain than this.
Horrific.
250,000 children have been molested, raped, and the government, our government, is trying to basically sweep it under the carpet.
And that is why this aspect of child sex offences is very specific. When people say, and I hear squealing lefties, James, on Newsnight and things like that, going, yeah, but what about all the white abusers? Yeah, I want to deal with them, and I also want to chop their bits and pieces off as well. But what we have here is, in the same way we dealt with the Catholic Church, we have here something very specific, and it's specific for a number of reasons. There's a correlation and a similarity in offenders, which is clearly something anyone would look at, but you also have the cover-up aspect.
Absolutely. You know, we've got what happened up in South Yorkshire. We had the leader of the Labour Council that basically became the police and crime commissioner who had to resign. This goes from the top to the bottom. And we need to know who turned a blind eye, whether it be politicians, whether it be the police, whether it be the social services. Yeah. We need a reckoning. This country needs to deal with this blemish because it's the biggest stain on our country. We need to deal with it. 250,000 children. Keir Starmer, have a look at yourself. Look at yourself in the mirror. This needs to be done.
It does indeed, and you put it brilliantly and passionately as well, James. Thank you very much indeed for that. Just before I talk to Steve in Leeds, Voice of Doom. Voice of Doom. Remember this voice?
Because it's based on a deception.
Yeah, and I said we didn't have a winner. Well, as it turns out, Finn, our producer, is on occasions a professional half-wit. And he forgot to say, oh, actually, no, we do have a winner. We did have somebody got it right. And Toby in West Yorkshire, well done, Toby. You're the first and only person who got it correct. The answer was Alan Michael. Do you remember Alan Michael? Well, Alan Michael is still the South Wales Police and Crime Commissioner, by the way. But prior to that, he was part of the, I'm tempted to say, the Blair government. And I think he was Secretary of State for Wales. I'm pretty sure he was. And he was certainly a Home Office minister. Yeah, well, Secretary of State for Wales, but he was also the first leader of the Welsh Assembly. I think that's true as well, I think. I'm just trying to get I'm saying think a lot because I'm just trying to brush up on my own political memory on that one. Alan Michael is that I interviewed him once years and years ago, and he was the most dull man I think I've ever interviewed. He had nothing to say. And I think we tried to even make it light-hearted in a couple of plays. He was having none of it, this fella. He was a right miserable old so-and-so. But I'm sure great to his family. Alan Michael is the right answer. Well done, Toby in West Yorkshire. Let's go to Steve in Leeds. How are you doing, Steve?
I'm fine, Ian. How are you?
Good. Yeah, what are you thinking?
Right. On this banning the burqa, because this links to the grooming gang scandal. I know you're gonna think that's mad, but first point, we do have laws in this country about what you can wear.
Yep.
You can't walk down the street with "I support Hamas" on your T-shirt or "I love the BNP."
Yep.
If you're a naturist, you can't walk around the streets naked. So we already have laws about how you dress, and how you dress shouldn't offend people.
True.
But banning the burqa links to the grooming gangs, and I'll tell you why.
Go on.
The people that the grooming gangs are looking to investigate come from a culture where if you don't cover yourself up as a woman, you are seen to be a loose woman that's openly available for sexual advance. Now, we used to do this in the 70s. In court, women would be asked if they got attacked on a night in a park, how you dressed, were you sexually promiscuous?
Yeah.
And we've learned as a society that's irrelevant.
Indeed.
Banning the burqa would send a message to all these cultures that believe just because a woman shows a bit of ankle or wears a miniskirt doesn't give you the right to sexually abuse her.
100%.
So, in a sense, it links to that scandal. It's this cultural view that people have that certain women who dress in a certain way are available and they have the right to attack them. And we as a society need to promote the fact that women, young girls, have the right, within modesty, to dress how they wish and appear how they want, and no man has the right to think, hey, she's up for it, and I'm right to do it.
Yeah, spot on. And these, perpetrators of these horrendous crimes, of course, were they believed culturally and probably religiously as well in many respects, that they were these girls were easy meat, and that's all they were. And they were white Western trash. Hence the reason why they thought there was a big fat green light to allow them to do it. They were better than these girls were. These girls were the bottom of the pecking order, and anything goes.
Don't forget, Ian, that asylum seeker from Saudi Arabia a few months ago that was in court for attacking a girl, he said, I come from a culture where nobody told me this was wrong.
Yeah, which is not true, because if he did that in Saudi Arabia, he'd be hanged by the whatsits.
Yes, but if a woman walked down the street in Saudi Arabia in a miniskirt...
Yes, they would also find them.
And go, it's your fault, love, you asked.
Yeah, no, they would. There would be victim blaming in those kind of circumstances. Steve, you make some brilliant points. Thank you. 0344 499 1000. We are going to go back to the slightly more light-hearted, but to some people, deadly serious issue of man bags. In fact, it's not just man bags, it's tracksuits. It's just wearing the wrong stuff. It does happen. You can usually spot somebody you're in a pub with your mates and everyone's got their own sense of dress, and you look across and somebody walks in, male or female, doesn't really matter, and you just think, wow, that was brave, or that was like weird, whatever. We can all be a bit judgmental, but is there a agreeable set of norms that we would all agree on, that it's not right to turn up like you don't turn up at a funeral in your swimming trunks, unless, of course, somebody had requested in their kind of last words that I'd like my funeral for people to turn up in how they would go swimming. Be a bit weird, wouldn't it? And maybe a bit chilly of a November. 0344 499 1000. Man bags and tracksuits on the way. Keep it here. It's Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
25 to 4. So, a pub in Greater Manchester has banned man bags, tracksuits and stonewashed jeans to create a smart casual atmosphere and attract families. This is the Millgate pub, where the dress code has split opinion locally, but the landlord insists it helps maintain order, a growing trend among UK pubs. Let's speak to Nick Hems, men's personal stylist and shopper. Good afternoon to you, Nick. Nice to have you with us.
Good afternoon. How are you doing, Ian?
I'm all right, good as gold. Look, I am one of those people that believe what you wear does matter. I can't remember who it was. It was somebody like Paul Smith, or no, I think it was Tom Ford, actually, that said dressing nicely is just polite. And I thought that was quite a nice way to put it.
It is good manners, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's something in that, isn't there? I mean, if you walk around the place with your, I know kids do the whole thing with the jeans round the kneecaps, and that's gone away a little bit, but it's still there to some extent. But this pub, they obviously want a different kind of clientele, I would guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have to kind of defend that with other measures inside the pub as well, because if you're going to potentially exclude people, as is the case, people are saying you're excluding people, then you've also got to say, right, if we're going to put our dress code at this level, then we've also got to keep people in the pub that are going, so that they're not kind of like losing customers. Like, what are you going to do with the atmosphere? What are you going to do with live stuff that's happening in there to kind of really elevate the pub?
Yeah, and it does matter, doesn't it? I mean, you're right. If you want to, if you decided that your drinking establishment, was once the domain of, kids whose ID is a bit iffy and, they're just about, getting served a pint, and you want to, you've decided you want to expand into another territory, then, as the landlord, it's kind of up to you. On the wider issue, though, I mean, one of the things they're banning is man bags. I mean, I've got to ask you, Nick, are you a man bag owner?
Yeah, I've got a couple of man bags.
Yeah, the same here.
I'd like to see how they're actually policing that, because if you turned up, Ian, in your suit as you are now, and a leather bag around your shoulder, are they going to exclude you, or is it kind of those man bags that you might buy from well-known sports stores that are kind of maybe a little bit sportier?
That's
and how are they going to police, what's a man bag and what's an acceptable man bag?
Yeah, that's very true. It's funny because I've got a work bag, which I don't know whether that would be called a man bag, but the kind of more the messenger bag. I've got a couple of those. I mean, they do get comments, mostly from mates when I wear. When I turn up somewhere, I think you're probably exactly the same as me, Nick, just looking at you as well. The first thing people say when they see me is, one, he's a bit tasty. Number two, he's nicely... I can't even do it with a straight face. He's nicely dressed. And similarly, you look well groomed and nicely turned out. Your mum would be proud, all of that kind of stuff. I always think about those kind of things. But I wouldn't wear a man bag with a suit.
No, I think there's ways around that. It's complex because there's kind of like very much unwritten rules about how you would wear it. And I think, if you've got for example, you're in a suit and you've got a leather weekend bag in your hand, very acceptable. True. Looks good, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But a smaller bag potentially around your shoulder, and you have to be very careful with the materials, what it looks like, the size.
True.
It's just a minefield.
Yeah, it is just a minefield. I mean, other areas, Nick, I mean, going to the theatre is a good example where that's changed dramatically over the years. I mean, if you look back at the old Victorians, they were wearing kind of, spats and God knows what else, walking cane and bow ties and all the rest of it. Now that's really changed, and I've never quite worked out whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. You see people in the theatre just wearing jeans, sweatshirt and a pair of trainers.
Well, yeah, I think the way you dress kind of creates atmosphere, doesn't it? Yeah. And it also changes the way that you behave dressing well. I mean, there's loads and loads of studies that have been done you know, how you dress and how it affects your behaviour and how you feel about yourself and how you act. And actually, even being able to answer questions, you know, like there's been studies done that according to the way that you dress, you're more likely to be able to answer certain questions than not. So it's really interesting. Even when I go back to my days of going clubbing on a Friday and Saturday night, where you had to wear shoes, and people would put black socks over their trainers to try and get in. And if you were caught wearing trainers, there's no way you were getting in anywhere. But all of that seems to have gone as well now.
Yeah, I've had the reverse of that a few years ago now. But me and some mates, we'd done the usual thing, gone out and, you know, probably drank a little bit too much. Thought, there's a club in Clerkenwell. Somebody said, go there. It's one of those that kind of doesn't open till about 2. And so there we are in the queue, because there's a queue. I hate queuing. We get to the front, and a couple of, you know, big lads on the door. And one of them looked at us. There were 5 of us. We were all dressed nicely in suits and looking pretty good. And the bouncer came out, and he picked one of us and said, "Can I have a word, mate?" And he whispered to my mate, and then my mate came back to us and went, "We're going. We're off." And we said, "What? What do you mean we're off?" We queued up for half an hour. He said, "Yeah, they don't want you in there dressed like that." Now, we were kind of overdressed, one of the theories that we looked like we could be coppers. So, and when I think back to that particular club, there would be a very good reason why the old Bill might want to have a little look around the toilets. I don't know whether it was that or what it was, but or it could be that they were trying to kind of go for a younger vibe, and we were in our early 30s, I suppose.
Well, I guess you go back in time and you look at people that turned up to a nice bar wearing a suit or wearing a blazer. That might be the kind of clientele you'd want, because those people typically had a bit of money. Whereas you look at now, the people with a little bit of money, they're wearing tracksuits, they're wearing, you know, designer trainers. Back in the day, you know, a pair of trainers, you'd think, you know, not great. You know, probably didn't cost loads of money, whereas now you can be buying designer trainers costing £1,000, and that signifies that you've got money. So kind of what signifies wealth has changed massively from 20 years ago. So excluding those kind of people from your establishment now is something you really want to think about, because they just won't go. They'll go somewhere else, and that other place will make money.
So in terms of, do you like a suit, Nick?
I don't wear one as much as I'd like to, but I do love wearing a suit. You can't feel better than in a well-made suit that fits you well. Yeah,
I think suits, they just, when you put one on, they just feel very nice. You know, obviously me doing this, I'm in the visual medium, so I wear a suit every day. I used to wear a tie. I don't wear a tie now. What would you do with me in terms of what you can see right now? I've got a reasonably tasty blue suit on. Trouble is with blokes, it's either blue or grey, isn't it?
I think that's one of the key things I always say, like, to any client or anyone that I'm speaking to, you know, the number one rule of style is fit. You've got a good fit. Everything's fit you well. Also, then you kind of got colour. Colour is a key thing. And a lot of guys do fall into that kind of blue, grey, black. And it's about kind of trying to pull away from that. What can you do to change that? What can you do to change the texture of what you're wearing, add a little bit more depth? And accessories, I can see you're wearing glasses, you know, so it's like, how can we make that maybe a little bit more interesting? Can we change your aesthetic through something slightly different? So that's the only thing. But you look good. You look good in. You know you do. You've already said that.
You're very kind. I'm always infuriated by the suit choice, though, because if you go into, you know, a nice shop, it is nearly always blues and greys. And I have this conversation with a mate. I think black guys can wear better coloured suits than white guys. I genuinely believe that.
I think it all depends on skin tone. You know,
yeah, I think it really does. So my mate JJ, he can wear all sorts of stuff that, don't get me wrong, every now and again he looks like a nut job, but generally speaking, he can wear colours that I can't wear. And it just does well on him. You know, he can wear like a really nice burgundy or a kind of bright, not bright green, but a green, and gets away with it. And I think there is a skin colour element to it, isn't there? And I suppose like hair colour comes into it as well.
If you're kind of like typical Caucasian, if you're Scandinavian, depending on where you come from and your skin tone and makeup, like there are greens that will work well on you, and there are greens that will kind of drain all the colour from your skin.
Yeah.
You know, not a lot of people wear black really well, but there tends to be a shade of a colour that will work best for you. But a lot of people shy away from wearing red, for example. Someone
it's
looks
tricky.
red and go, I'm not putting that on. Then they put it on and go, oh, actually, I quite like that. So, you know, it's just about experimenting with different colours of suits and different textures. And do I have structured shoulders or do I have unstructured shoulders? You know, because that changes the whole aesthetic.
Yeah, that's very true. There was, I did toy with the idea of only wearing one colour. And that you kind of make that your thing. You know, there was a journalist, was it Martin Bell, isn't it? He always wore a white suit. And I don't think I'd look like flipping Casper if I'd have walked out in that. I mean, it would have just been rubbish. But, you know, he kind of pulled it off, this guy. That's all he ever wore. He reported for 20, 30 years in a white suit. Wherever he went, if you saw him in the street, he had a white suit on, always.
It's personal branding, isn't it? Like, everyone recognises him. Some people can pull that off and some people just wouldn't completely. And I think it depends on certain things like your charisma levels, for example. Is that just you? And everyone just knows that's you and they don't expect anything else.
Yeah, that's
Whereas,
very true.
you know, if I did that, I go anywhere and people expect me to be a certain way because I'm a stylist. So if I turn up to an event, I've got to make sure that I fit within this certain kind of like,
that's true.
Good, essentially.
That's true. What's your one area? You know, for some guys, it's shirts. They always spend a few quid more on shirts. For some, it's shoes. Others, jackets. What is the area, Nick, that you find yourself going, I always make sure I have a good this on?
Jackets and footwear. I guess that's my weakness. And I think it's because as well, especially this time of year, it's getting colder. That's what everyone sees you in. That's your first impression that you make. And I think this is all about style, fashion, you know, turning up at the pub that we were talking about. It's all about first impressions, isn't it? And I think when you're out and about now and you're wearing a jacket or you're wearing a coat, that is usually the first thing that people see of you. So I think having a good coat, a good jacket and good footwear, always good places to start.
Absolutely bang on. Nick, thank you very much. Nice to have you with us. Nick Hems, men's personal stylist and shopper. I love a jacket, stroke blazer kind of jacket. I mean, it depends where you are. But you know, one of the main practical reasons for me goes back to the man bag. Because if you don't have the man bag, but if I'm wearing a suit jacket, but not the trousers, well, I'm wearing trousers, but not the suit trousers. Don't split the suit. That's another apparent no-no. But if you're wearing jeans and a jacket, you have pockets to put stuff in. That, to me, is a game changer. Whether it's your phone, whether it's your keys, if you're a smoker, you can put a packet of cigarettes in one of the... So it's got that. Girls can go out... I know not all girls take a handbag out with them, but that option is always there. Whereas to blokes, that option is, you know, it kind of can be... Amy, do you take a handbag out wherever you go? Amy doesn't like pockets. She says she's got no pockets. What, in anything? But yeah, women don't have pockets, do they, in the same way? I mean, you can get... Unless you're wearing jeans, you've got pockets. Amy says her phone doesn't fit in her jeans pocket. So that means she's either got a big phone or something else is going on. Because doesn't everybody have the whole thing with... Doesn't everybody have that whole thing with pockets and phones? Don't ever put your phone in your back pocket, by the way. I mean, I cannot believe anyone still does the phone in the back pocket. Finn, do you do the phone in the back pocket? Oh, no, because he got mugged and, I don't know, something or other, in Thailand. He said it was a mugging. It was more like a date, I think. Can't remember the guy's name now, but anyway, he had a good time. Yep, classic straight man joke. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk. We'll talk to Craig over here in Oxford. Craig, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Afternoon, Ian. It's nice you guys to be covering a serious news story this afternoon as well. So
absolutely. It's about time we put this to the top of the agenda, right?
Exactly. I have one that irks me quite a lot. Look, I just look at me. Oh my God! Look at you. It's when people wear a matching tracksuit, top and bottoms, outside of a sporting event or a team thing. You know, they've got up and they've purposely made sure that they've got a matching tracksuit ready to go out to the shops, and they have the little over the strap kind of little pouch bag. It's not even like a where you refer to as a man bag, or like a...
No, it's like a little Nike bag or something, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They go out like that. They'll have a hood half over their head because they couldn't pull the hood all the way on. It's got to be just perched off the back of their head.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know if there's a term for it, but I guess I'd class it as chavtastic chic.
It is. Like it is. I have to say, I do wear tracksuit bottoms, but if I put a tracksuit on, that would feel weird unless I was going to some kind of sports thing, right?
Exactly. That's where I'm coming from. We're like, if you're playing for a team, everyone needs to turn up in a tracksuit bottoms and top.
Yeah.
Great. Absolutely no problem with it. You're representing your country, anything, fine.
Yep.
If you're going down to Iceland to stock up on frozen...
That wasn't the ideal choice of store you chose there, because you might find quite a lot of people in Iceland in the tracksuits. No stereotyping.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's I don't know if you find this as well. No matter what you've been doing for the day, no matter how grubby you are, if you've been in the garden, you've got soil all over, dirty hands, whatever, you can always rock up to your local Asda near where we are, and you'll fit right in. You'll feel fine. I can guarantee every time you go round there, you'll see someone in a dress gown or a onesie or something, and it's just like
the onesie dressing gown. The dressing gown thing has become a thing as well, hasn't it? It used to be just people who were too bloody lazy to get dressed. Now it's become actually a statement almost in itself. Craig, I've got to move. You've been brilliant. Thank you for that. 0344 499 1000. More coming from you next on Talk.
I remember talking to Matt Hancock at the time, who was the health secretary, and I said, Matt, who is in danger, who is dying? Why don't you just protect the elderly and the vulnerable and let everybody else get on with it? Locking up all these youngsters was insane, and I believe that this is a ticking time bomb for society to be picking up the pieces in many months and years to come. You know, the mental health issues that we really haven't even begun to scratch the surface of, I think you can directly link back to the closing of the schools.
we became quite fearful, really, of describing what ethnicity our abusers were, and it should never get to that. The lady that was running the panel along with the Home Office, she was an ethnic minority ambassador, so I don't believe personally that she was ever pro-victims, pro-survivors in this case. Everyone that's on these panels are very biased. They're not impartial. I think it was a way to find out what survivors knew, what
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Michael says, it just reminded me of something, this. And there was a standing joke in my family about man bags. Yes, I admit that when I go on holiday, I like to travel light, while my children and my wife carry rucksacks onto the aeroplane for the flight. I carry a small handheld man bag. Oh, now you're in whole new territory now when you get into the handheld man bag. The size of an iPad. Inside, I have a set of headphones. I've got a book and a snack, invariably roasted peanuts. You haven't just got one of those freezer bags with you, in the hope that there will be one flight that I take that no one has a nut allergy. Yeah, they used to be called continental wallets, didn't they? Because if you went to France or Spain or somewhere, you would see blokes carrying these bags. It didn't happen here. But that's the handheld one. That's not as usual as the man bag, as it might be. Martin is in Staffordshire. Martin, we've not got long, but I'm sure you can do it. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yes, I owned the UK's longest running same-owner nightclub. So my father opened it in '72. So I have seen the change in dress code throughout the 80s, 90s, noughties, 10s. And it is really amazing that in the 1980s, you took your tie or undid your tie, you'd be thrown out of the nightclub.
Wow. Yeah.
And then we go into today, and you can enter in trainers and a tracksuit.
Yeah.
It has changed. There is a thing, we shouldn't dictate what people should wear. Who are we to say what music you should listen to, what clothes you should wear?
True.
But I did shed a tear the day I started allowing jeans into my nightclub back in the 90s.
Because you knew there was no way around it. You had to run with the time, right? The vogue of the day.
You did. I blame the designers. They first of all started changing denim to look like trousers.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Started making trainers to look like shoes. All to get past the doorman.
Or to get past the doorman. That was the theory behind it. Martin, that's been brilliant. Thank you very much. Short and sweet. Martin in Staffordshire. Does it matter what you wear? Here's a man that's always fairly easy on the eye, from the neck down, is...
Shame about the face.
To Peter Cardwell. What have you brought with you?
Are you familiar with a bob fock? Do you know what that is?
No need for that, for goodness sake.
Do you know what a bob fock is?
I can take a guess, but it'll probably be wrong.
Body of Baywatch, face of Crime Watch.
Is that what it's
You look at someone who's, good body, bad face.